over on weedtv.com. And we are now live, I think, on both platforms. I'll go here in a second. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Growing with Fishes podcast. This is episode 90. It's going to be a really special episode. There's a gentleman with us named Breeder Steve, who I thought we'd never actually get a chance to talk to. He was kind of a phantom from overgrow.com way back in the day, and he's here to join us. So we're super stoked to have him. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We also have with us is Drew Lamb from Pyramid Pure Foods. He's joining us as well. He'll be talking about what he does. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, it's really cool to be here, especially for the debut on WeTV.
Oh yeah, we're dual streaming today. If this all goes well, we'll switch completely over next week. I just wanted to make sure we had a second backup copy of the recording before I totally relinquish control over to the other platform. We also have Josh from Dutch Blooms.
Hey guys, how's it going? Sorry, I was muted.
Hey, no worries.
Hey Josh.
We have a little added announcement later on to go with the what we had to announce last week. Marty, we have Marty as well. How's it going, Marty?
How's it going? AP Meds.
We got Mr. Green Jeans.
Nice glass.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey everybody, what's happening? Hey Breeder Steve, you and I go back to Overgrow.
Yeah, man.
we had many fun conversations.
We got
Sweet.
Roger from ilovegrowingmarijuana.com.
Good evening, everybody. Enjoy the show. First night on Weed TV. How about that?
Heck yeah.
Show number 90. Have to remember.
All right. So thanks a lot for joining us, Breeder Steve. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do now, and then I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about. I know I first read about your exploits on overgrow.com. You were the very first person to have anything written down about aquaponic cannabis. Your stuff was one of the things that helped me get the dual root zone to where it was, along with meeting Vlad, and it was really kind of helped me quantify that as an idea. So looks like we had an internet split. We'll be back. We'll get them back here in a second.
We lost about half the panel.
Yeah, we'll get them back.
Let's see, we lost Josh, Mr. Green Jeans. There's Josh. We lost Steve, of course.
Let's see here.
Steve too.
Yeah.
There's Mr. Green Jeans back. So
we got everybody but Breeder Steve back.
Yeah. And now we lost Josh again.
Whack-a-mole. There we go. Now we got everyone back. The internet does that sometimes.
It's like whack-a-mole with guests.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what it looked like.
All righty. So now that we got everyone.
Yeah.
You were. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit. A little bit about what you have a pretty amazing project going on down in Colombia, and then I'd love to hear about your early days of your early aquaponic stuff, because you're by far the earliest documented person as far as anything in writing about aquaponic cannabis growing. And I'm super just astounded that we were able to find you and have you on the show. So thank you again for coming on.
Oh, it's really my pleasure. I mean, I've been a loud advocate of aquaponic growing for a long time because, once you do it right, you're sold. It really is the cleanest, smoothest puff you're ever going to grow. And just burns with a white ash. So I was an outdoor grower for about 5 years for growing personal, back before I had a place to hang a light. And then once I got a place to hang a light, I immediately built an aquaponic system. And then that was in like 1994. And I was just in love with it. It was really so much fun. And I thought nobody spends as much time staring at the reservoir as I would. And later I built a little business out in Portugal and built aquaponic systems there and turned on heady people into their own, because a lot of growers would really trade in their own bud to get some. They'd trade 2 for 1 to get some aquaponic, if you know what I mean. They really like. And so as I showed people to do it, I called the system I built there a bioponic system. We had a hybrid. There would be basically a table with a pond liner, so it would be about 2.5 feet deep, and the top was plastic mesh pots that I'd filled in after I hung 2 ropes, which made 4 tails down to the bottom of the table, and there would be misters hung under the table, and then spaghetti tubes on top of the rocks that they would feed off the return. Every time the return sump kicked on, that would push water back to the aquarium through PVC with a ton of holes drilled into it. So it just churned the aquarium when the water went back in. And then every 20 minutes or so, the timer would kick on to run a pump from the aquarium to blast misters under the tabletop. So it was kind of a hybrid aquaponic aeroponic system in the flowering side. And that table would drain out through Rubbermaid buckets I called mother marshes. They would be on maybe a 4-inch riser, and then there'd be one mother marsh or bucket on the floor that had 2 sump pumps as returns, and the one sump would be set higher than the other with the float switches. So you'd have the redundancy built in there. It was just incredible how the roots would run down the wet ropes. It would be like big carrots going down 4 tails. So I'd have 36 pots under 1,000 watt, 4x4 area. And they would have as much roots under every baseball bat bud as like a 7-gallon pot. It was just stupid. And it still tasted incredible. Like, even though people would look at it and be like, those are just huge buds. How can you do that aquaponic? It's not that you need 2,000 parts per million. It's just that they need constantly available nutrients. So it doesn't have to be in a high concentration. It just has to be constantly available. And it just blew my mind how well it grew. And I just couldn't shut up about teaching people to do it.
Yeah, that's why we're all here.
Yep.
That's right. I'm glad. And that was a long time ago, when you think about that. That was a long time ago. That was the 90s. And to see that it's caught on, it's still really who's doing it kind of thing, like hardly anybody, right? So, but it's great to see it really catching on, because it's just a so flavorful way to grow, and it's so kind to the environment. I never had to drain a reservoir I had for 3 years until I moved one time. Like, there was a float there that let water in when the aquarium went down a quarter of the way, which is what it took to fill with. And then, so if it ever went below a quarter, the float just dropped like from a horse trough, just those red and black plastic.
Right.
And it was hooked up to a hose. We never drained the res, for 3 years. It just topped itself up. It was really a hoot. I would have people get a street queen. They would be sitting there all stoned staring at the aquarium, and they'd be like, well, tell me about it. What does it eat? What do you feed the fish? And I'd be like, oh, whatever we're having. And I'd just toss a cheeseburger in the res. And the look on their faces, like the writers from Red Eye or High Times or whoever was, their jaws would just hit their chest. It's like, you just threw a cheeseburger in your reservoir, and I'd timer there, I'd flip it, it'll be gone.
That's hilarious.
Be gone, just a riot. Yeah, it was a total riot. Normally, I found feed any food, like was in food. I was very fortunate in that I was next door to an aquarium wholesaler, like an importer of fish. So they had 2 floors of guppies, and they would come over, bring me a bucket of goldfish. And we would pour it in the res and just watch them disappear, all the awesome apart in no time. It was too funny.
That's great. I think Silver Arm had a bunch of Oscars too, Steve. Steve too?
Yeah, I actually had a bunch
Whichever
of,
Steve you are.
I had Oscars actually breeding in the aquaponics greenhouse in Colorado. I have a video of the two males like locking jaws and spinning around, and then it's cool because they pair off, and then they're really good parents. They'll actually they'll form like an arc and protect the babies and fend off any other fish that come around.
That's really something.
Yeah. For being such a mean fish, they're really good parents.
I found a few of my clients would try switching to foods or flake foods if they ever felt flurrium or pot tasted and smelled like fish food, which is not pretty. Like the dry pellets, they just horrible. But if you gave them live food or frozen food, gold, right? But the pellets, you look on the ingredients of the fish food and it looks like a bag of fertilizer. But but it really has a stinky smell when you open like fish flakes or something for your goldfish. Think how bad the smell, because your pot just absorbs whatever it's in. That's why it's so good for phytoremediation, right? So they would plant hemp around Chernobyl to remove radioactivity or toxins, heavy metals.
Yeah.
You pick up whatever it's in. So whatever you feed it is what's in your bud, right?
So what were some of the challenges you ran into, and how did you overcome them when you were first trying to grow in aquaponics?
Temperature. That was the first thing you gotta learn. You can't keep the roots around like 22 to 24. If they get hotter than that, they start yellowing and getting messy. And same with the fungus gnats. If you have the open hydroton, so you learn to cover and plant through plastic and maybe wrap a little around the bait, kind of seal the roots from the big difference too.
Awesome. So why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the other projects you've done, and then about what you got going on there in Colombia, because that's where you're at right now.
That's true. Well, most of what I was better known for than aquaponics was developing some seed, and did that for a while, a few years in Switzerland after sort of doing it as a hobby in Canada. And then I've taken a long time off to make wine in Okanagan Valley, and as waiting for regs to show up that were acceptable. Like when I went to Switzerland, it was legal to grow. You didn't need a light grow. There was no requirements. It was just the way it's supposed to be. It was like growing tomatoes. So it was really hard when the first Canadian regs came out to look at, okay, I got to build a prison to grow the pot in. No, I don't think so, and I really growing overall. Wanted to wait until that was a possibility again. And I'd always wanted to grow in the tropics because I'm kind of, a little bit tired of the Afghanica Kush scene, and I really love those high notes on the tropical thin leaf delicious stuff that's just perfume. So I've always wanted to grow in the tropics. And now I've been able to have a few plants down here. In Colombia, it's legal to have 20 plants for every person. And there's no other restrictions. It's not like if the neighbors can see it or if they're 10 feet tall, there's no issue about it that way, which is really something I respect about this country. And then their regs, the first draft of their regulations came out, and I had a look and thought, these are brilliant. This is the best I've seen. It was like 12 pages long compared to like 400 candidators of the acceptable. I would these rules. So I here and co-founded a company. We were the first fully licensed one, and now we're setting up, field farming, essentially commodity cannabinoids that we're literally growing in fields, but I'm raising it all on pond water. So the pond water in the dry season is remarkably green and full of algae, but right now is the rainy season and the water's a little diluted, and you can tell by the season and the greenness of the plants. The plants are a little paler than they were in the dry season when the water was visibly green. So it's really just to be able to flood fields with pond water and watch medical grass grow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I like that too. I was talking to a fellow trying to do a farm in Canada, and I'm trying to. Steve and I are trying to convince him to do that, make a pond and water
You know what?
water it with
The whole living scenario, it's just it just works.
it's
You
living.
know, you don't have to do a lot of math, and it's a lot to like measure what percent of this and that you have. You're a little more flexible on pH and things as well. And I just, you know, spiritually attached to it and empirically attached to it. Like it just makes sense to me to do it. And I get I can't believe my reservoir now have caimans in them and all, you know, tropical beasts. And it's just hilarious. It's like, I'm finally using crocodile shit to grow it, you know?
That's so cool.
So I understand you recently did like a million seed sift or something like that. You want to talk about
Million
that?
seed search, I'm calling it. But we have a window of opportunity here when you have a license. It's called the Fuente Semi, the source of seed, and that expires in December. So I just put out a call out, or a tender really, like either I'll buy your seed wholesale or you can send me some, but I need like a minimum of 75 each. And I will put them all in a massive selection crop. I've got 2 agronomists that are going to do, you know, strain rep with, you know, how many blades on every leaf, all the base metrics and photos and whatnot. So, and then we'll be sending it all to the lab. So the people that are donating seed are invited for a free tour, come for a trip and check it out. See, and I'm really trying to build up the entire world collection. So it's going to be just a gas I'm having, getting all the seeds. People are sending them in the mail. I'm getting 3 or 4 envelopes a week from around the world. From Nigeria, India, Australia, all over Canada, and even Colombia. So there's so much possibility because I'm 3 degrees off the equator. I can grow virtually any trees, and I've found from personal patch that even in the dry season, I can finish any indicas too, really, really well. So it's 2 seasons basically, but we can plant all year round. So we're on a cycle of we're going to plant 5 or 6 plants in the field every week. I'm starting on a lot more seed than that, but obviously I don't finish every plant. Like if I plant 1 million seeds, I might only finish a quarter of them, you know? Maybe even 10% of them, because I'll thin them out as they go. But and after that, that's what we own now, is about 3,000 acres worth. So, and that's flat, fertile peas in our region because they all want to be close to the cities with nice restaurants. And I'm in the prairies, really, where it's quite remote. The locals call it the jungle, but it reminds me, I would think of like a green Texas or something. There are buckles and horse trucks and country city whenever I have to be there. And when I come down here, it's beautiful.
I've had a couple of my friends visit down there and say the same thing, that it's, you know, just a beautiful area, but it's a lot different than most of what we have here.
Well, that's right, and that's half the challenge is always trying something new, you know. And in Canada, there's no option to grow outdoors yet, so it's either indoors or greenhouse. And the last thing I want to do is spend my days in a windowless box to grow my pot under beeping lights and everything. I gotta open it, you know. It's like it's over the Canadian regs. So down here I can develop to use in this region, taking silos of those seeds and planting them with a seed drill like corn. And I was hoping within about 3 years, 2 to 3 years, to planting, harvesting, and processing about meters.
Okay, I'll say something since nobody else will. That's pretty awesome. You know, you got that going on down there. I love the fact that you can grow year round. I can
I
grow.
want to drive the price of cannabinoids down to the.
What you said? What
Sorry, go ahead.
you said? What? I couldn't understand you, Steve. Breeder Steve.
I said, go ahead. I think I cut you off there.
Oh no, I would just.
Sorry,
No,
I think I cut you off.
No.
What do you recommend for pollen preservation? So how do you preserve your pollen for your breeding stock? Or do you just pollinate
You know
right
what?
away?
In a long time, I did that in 2001, I believe, 2002, and I don't remember the name of it, but it's like a glass flask, it's like a pot but it's out of glass, and there's top with another that sits on it, and then it has a little vacuum pump off of it. So we would put test tube stand, and we would try with dried rice, with dried, we'd bake flour, use dried flour, and then I tried some capped under vacuum in the fridge, the best way I could keep it.
So what have you ever seen anything strange like there was the Frisian duckfoot back in the day? Have you seen any other particularly noteworthy or bizarre oddball strains in your breeding? You're working with so many different varieties.
Well, not lately, but the most interesting ever found something I'd bred. It was out of some incredible bag seed from Vancouver in the 90s, and it was probably like 95 or 96, and it was Brian's Killer. And I had a girl that was renting a room from me, and she had a beeper and was selling eights around town. And she usually had, this was $40, but then twice a year, this Ryan's Killer key $5. Nobody charged more than 40 for an eighth of anything. So it's all right, just try it. So I tried some, and there happened to be, and I was like, okay, it's really good. And I had very unique, had a very sandalwood flavor in that. And out of everybody in the house, I think they found 6 seeds in total. There was just a few in it. And I planted the 6 seeds. All 6 sprouted. All 6 were female. And they grew like a vine. Like they had really bendy, you could train them on the fence horizontally, like they were really flexible. The leaf started and it had those same florets, the petioles, like, so pretty the plant, no pollen, Paul. You want to try and recreate that, even though I didn't do it the first time around. I have some ideas about what I think the guy was doing, and I am going to try that out because I think it'll be a game changer if we can have this outdoor on any strain, that in the areas where there's hemp outside, grow for extracts, but they're still cutting yield dramatically because they've all got CD pod. I know guys growing around areas in Canada with a lot of, got no choice but to sift it and then make extract. And if it could all be seedless, that's 2% the idea.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about your seed company you had. You ran a seed company for quite a while.
Yeah, Spice of Life Seeds. That was like 2003, really. I'm sure I'm sure you could name a bunch of the strains. I name them all sweet crosses, but they weren't all obviously strains. But I did stabilize Sweet Tooth 3 to the point of truly being homogeneous, you know, homozygous. That was a fun one, and that was 3 times back crossed or cubed to grapefruit. And it was pretty darn tight and I've actually got some growing in the greenhouse right now. Be fun to see how it turns out at 3 degrees.
Nice.
Very cool. So what are the other challenges have you noticed growing in the tropics, aside from probably the heat and having to do with the split greenhouses with the split level at the top?
It's pretty early to say for the greenhouses, but we're really just using the greenhouses for propagation, and all the production and flowering for testing will all be done in the field. The next phase of greenhouse I'm building is tight breeding rooms, so I can have pollination space without seeding everything around me. The main problem, I think, well, there's lots of problems, but I don't worry the bugs. Like, I've seen a few spider mites on plants outside, but I've never sprayed them for anything as I've done over the last year. But I did put together a little pepper garlic spray that I've started putting in veg space because there's all year round. If you're vegging anything photoperiod sensitive, you've got all night, which attract a lot of bugs. So we've had to put screens on the greenhouses because they were open walls, like the walls would roll up and down. But I put screens on them to, you know, slow down the onslaught of creatures in the night that were coming in to have a look. Find just as many predators as problems, so it's more amusing than anything. The scariest thing in the personal veg in the last week or two was a giant tarantula. So I'm thinking fast, and you don't want to wear flip flops in there anymore. You start wearing the boots every day again, because spider mites are one thing, but tarantulas are another.
That's really cool. Any other
There's a lot of Go ahead.
Any other challenges you've noticed, you know, with a light cycle or the higher humidity or anything?
Well, obviously, for some strains, the wet season's a real challenge, and the humidity as well. But the light cycle who's an autoflower, because you'll find some that on 24 they're just not staying in veg. Those are useless to me down here because I really have to acclimatize varieties that'll produce what I want in this climate. And the local varieties maybe aren't resinous enough, or there's no tropical CBD varieties, for example. So that's going to take at least 3 generations. So basically a year and a half, we'll have some results, hopefully, on modern tropical varieties that are decent yielding for commodity cannabinoid crops, because I really want to plant it like corn. I don't want to be making cuttings to plant under lights in the field unless it's for research, unless I'm different things. But for the actual production crops, I have to acclimatize things that I can just plant field from seed and have it come up like corn. And that's really for me, I want to make seed. I want it to be affordable for the poorest world to get a bottle of tincture and not have a tree bill.
That's cool. Yep.
So which cannabinoids are you working on isolating or doing combinations of?
We're focused on CBD. Well, the number one THC, and a moderate amount of CBD. Tons of people are doing. I've got one of the largest, probably the world, to grow tea right now, because if I saw a Reuters article recently in the last week, I think, that said Colombia's got the 34% from the UN for medicinal cannabis, largest place. I've got the largest potential to plant it right now. It's not coming down this week, but literally licensed THC of anybody in the world right now. So it's that, and I can see the CBN post-harvest quite easily. So I'm not worried about breed plant. I can put out a 2-hour way to make it in the lab.
Very cool. So are you doing strictly just isolates then, or are you doing any other products as well?
Real range. And also we're going to make to order as customers, licensed importers from Australia and Europe, that whatever they want, we're willing to make to order. But essentially I'm focused on a fairly clear, full spectrum alcohol extract with terpenes intact that's suitable for vape pens. I think for a lot of medical conditions, people find immediate relief from vape pens. So that's sure and they want to make a pill, because we're doing clinical trials through University Rosario in Bogota, and it's soluble one is the easiest to titrate. It's what they're most confident doing studies with. So they do blinds.
Breeder Steve, I'm
half controlled, so each right are going to get a TH put on their. Any better?
Yeah, you kind of. I think I don't want to offend you or anything, but you need to light somewhere. Find out where it sounds good, because you're walking around, you're talking.
No, I'm sitting.
It's going.
I've been sitting in the same place. I've been sitting in the same place the entire time. I've just put a chair out in the yard.
Oh wow.
Oh no, it's just the internet connection's a little bit choppy. That's
okay.
Okay.
It goes in and out. It goes from you can hear you real good to you can't understand anything. And we're really wanting to hear the information. I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's too bad. So no, you brought it up because sad.
So I'm sorry, you're working with a university.
Anyway, so yeah, as far as what kind of medicine we're gonna make it. Go ahead.
Yeah, it cut out right when you were talking about working with a university.
Right. So one of the studies we're going to start with is for rheumatoid arthritis. So we'll use 5,000 people. That's totally not my department. I'm really interested in breeding cannabis for different goals, and really the sensory part of it, picking out my favorite terpene profiles. It's all about for me is I get off on the, and we will be able to export terpenes anywhere in the world, of course. Lots to do.
That's a good. I like that. That's good. You're just zeroed in on what you do, and that we've had a couple guests like that. No, that's not what I do. I do this, and I'm going to deliver terpenes to the world.
So we have a it's what are you using, steam separation, or are you using a different method?
Steam separation. Right now, we're just looking at the alcohol system, and I think we'll start with something basic like that. We're looking even at doing for terpenes, alcohol for cannabinoids, and then CO2 again to get the residual alcohol and oil out of the mass. So there's there's lots of ways to go, and we haven't totally signed off on everything we're doing. So it's almost premature of me to say.
Oh, interesting. Very cool. So, is there anything particularly unique about products in Colombia? I know always in the tropics you can find charas or whatever the local name is.
Yeah, I haven't. You know, I've had some fantastic and hash in the past. I don't have any at the moment, unfortunately, but I got some lovely flower, my own given. There's also in America doing fabulous extracts of every sort. So I'm very fortunate to have a good line on beautiful hydrocarbon extracts and distillate pens. So I've got pretty much the same quality I'd have anywhere in North America to puff while I'm getting started, which is a godsend, really.
Oh, that's cool. So, does anyone else have any other questions? What other questions do you guys have? Go ahead, Marty.
Oh, I think he answered pretty much all the ones I have for him. And, you know, it was great to hear about, you know, like, I think your breeding project or your seed project. What did you call that again? The million, something about million seeds or something?
The Million Seeds.
Million seeds.
Yeah, the Instagram, I think. Yeah.
And I think you're speaking.
So, yeah,
language a lot of time over there. I see him nodding his head a lot, going, "Oh yeah, oh yeah." When you get into the breeding stuff, I can see Mr. Green Jeans. His head starts going, "Yeah." You guys listen to rap music.
Mr. Green Jeans, anybody else have any questions? All right. Well,
He's trying to unmute him.
Have you, I have a question. Have you had a,
Hey, Steve, unmute Mr. Green Jeans. I see him trying to unmute his mic.
Oh, I got it.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
No, I am just curious in general about the whole, you know, being that close to the equator and everything, and the effect of the day length and what goes on there.
It's flower.
I mean, just I want to hear you expand
It's
a little bit on
flowering
that.
as soon as you put it outside, you know.
Just flowers immediately. It's just 12.
Well, just picture it's outside is that's it. So unless you're growing equatorials, which are I call them like daylings, right? Yeah. So those I've tried in the last year have taken anywhere like overall strains from 3 months to 9 months. 9 months you can plant it outside on 12. It still takes, but it's 8 feet. But indicas. You stick out an indica seed, and it's a pogo stick. Right away. It's a pogo stick, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to those are the daylight sensitive ones, right? Sure.
You know,
so we put those under lights to get up, and then it's out a switch, and they're on 12/12. So it's really you can plant outside for harvesting every day.
Mm-hmm. What about the idea of creating a long season autoflower, an autoflower that grew really large, like a tree autoflower, somehow combining?
Well, that's essentially what they are.
Oops, shit.
I think we lost him.
Oops, sorry, pardon my language.
That's what a lot of the equatorial strains are basically by default.
Yeah, I think that's what he was about to say. That's what the equatorial ones he was talking about are.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
We'll get it back here in a second.
And it trumpets what I keep, we keep teaching about doing the shorter photo periods with the equatorial type genetics with the sativas, is to just use that photo period so you can get them flowered and finished in a reasonable amount of time. And
Yeah,
that's
that's
natural.
magic.
Natural. It's more natural. If you veg the crap out of them, boy, they're gonna grow forever.
Well, you
Here's
Yeah,
the
you're
sativa.
asking for
inside
trouble.
as long as you want to, and then throw it outside and let it flower. Like
Yeah, but if you
Yes.
don't can't throw it outside, you gotta keep it under that. You know, you need it to finish. You know, in a
Some
reasonable.
of your sativas will actually have like a minimum, like even if you put them straight into flower. I noticed this in Jamaica.
Mhm.
Some of the more sativa dominant strains would have like a minimum veg time. They would ignore the fact that they're in flowering, even though the plants all around them were, completely gone to flower. These guys would keep growing. That's why if you look in like the video on my channel of the field and
remember that.
flower, that there's a bunch. Some of them are taller than I am, and they're just starting to go to flower, and other ones are ready to harvest next week.
Right.
Yeah, it's all in the phenol. Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
what's that show with where they went to Jamaica? The big YouTubers. What are
Strain
they?
hunters
Strain
or no?
hunters.
Strain hunters. That's it. When they went down there too, they talked about that a little bit too. When they went, remember they went through that big field and they had like some of them really tall and real short, and they talked about that too. Some of them had like a minimum, like they would just grow this tall and flower, like no matter what they would do that. Other ones would be, like you're saying, pogo sticks, like he was saying before, would do that. So that, pretty cool stuff. Hey, he's back.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. You made it
I
back.
don't know what happened. Just cut out again.
That's okay.
No, we're all good.
In the middle of nowhere, your
Discussing the
internet's
12 photo period's effect on plants indoors and outs while you were gone.
Yeah. The equatorials basically are auto flowers, is what I was saying. Is they just
Anyway.
take a long time to finish.
Right. Yeah. Long
That's-
season
that's cool.
autoflowers is exactly what an equatorial is.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I wonder if the times when I've tried to grow stuff like Laotian stuff like that indoors, if I used a longer day length, if that could have encouraged them more to be hermaphrodites. If I had just started them at 12-12, would they have been
That's
more likely to behave
possible.
sexually? I wonder.
Yeah,
Because
it's quite
or-
possible
or-
because that's
what that was Laotian stuff. I don't still have those genetics.
No.
That's about 15
what
years
they're
ago.
used to, but it's not necessarily what it is. They could have been these all.
The what? What?
Wild and crazy.
What's that? I get.
Could have been Hermes.
You guys have a fantastic having me
Yeah,
on.
that's right. It could have been Hermes all along. Anyways, right? Maybe. But I was just
That's-
thinking. I wonder
That's right.
if the day length,
But it definitely didn't help him finish.
yeah, because I probably did start them under a longer day length for a little while, which case they probably sprang up and acted like trees right away, and I panicked and threw them in the flowering room right away. I'm sure they didn't live that long under the long day length, which would have been fluorescence, but still. I don't know. Yeah, they were just unruly, anyways, huh? They were just like they were fence straddlers. They didn't want to play nice. They just didn't want to be one sex or
That's
the other.
cool.
Yeah.
I hope you find.
No,
one
I saw. The worst I've seen for hermaphrodism down here is the mango biche, where I've had like a lot of true hermaphrodites, where it's like literally one branch female, one branch.
It's frustrating. You
Not
can't
like
get in.
a couple bananas, but like alternate sexes, like weird looking plants. Of the other, like Punta or Punta Rojo, I haven't seen bad hermaphrodism the way I've seen in the mango biche. It's the mango biche is almost like their early strain, which is a father one.
Cool.
Huh.
That's great. Fantastic.
Thank you so much for documenting all that you do and putting together all these information. Is the information from that million seed search going to be available publicly, or is that just an in-house thing you're doing?
Absolutely. No, I'm going to post, like all the people that sent seeds, I've promised them back. I think I'm going to get to all post.
Very cool. Awesome.
Did that come through?
Most of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
Oh,
so
shitty.
much for all your do and all your documentation and all the posts and again you were the first person that's posted anything about aquaponic cannabis, and I appreciate you coming on, and love to have you on again sometime soon, maybe a little bit later when you have maybe some time during the daytime too, and see a little bit what you got going on.
That would appreciate your appreciation. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you. Take
Thank
care.
you so
Night.
much.
Anytime. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, that was really cool.
Yeah, I realized there was a time delay. You could tell sometimes we would say something, and then he would go, "Oh," like
It's just yeah, it's in the middle of nowhere, so
yeah.
Night, guys. Sleep tight.
good night. Thank you.
Good night, brother.
Right. Thanks for coming, Steve.
Anytime.
All right. Well, we also have with us is Mr. Drew Lamb. He is from Pyramid Pure Foods, and they do all different kinds of cool stuff. Thanks for coming on the show. Why don't you tell us a little about what you do?
Hey, you guys. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I have a project in Ashland, Oregon called. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, one second.
Okay.
Breeder Steve, can you?
Yeah, I'm just trying to here.
Oh, okay.
Story.
No, man, you're welcome to stick around. But,
Yeah, please stick
Well,
around.
yeah, just saying, I can stick around, but I got to mute my mic, and I haven't figured. There we go.
Yeah, but, there you go. Cool.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, that's better. All right.
There we go.
Yeah.
What's
yeah,
up, Drew?
I have an urban aquaponics farm in Ashland, Oregon, called Pyramid Pure Foods, located in an old warehouse that was the site of the Pyramid Juice Company, which used to make organic juice starting back in the mid 70s. So I've been operating in there since 2012, and I primarily produce microgreens and basil and shiso and mints for local restaurants. So I'm in a unique position where there's a lot of really nice restaurants close by. The warehouse is just a few blocks from downtown, and it's a tourist community, and so it's been a good spot. It's in a building that I've managed. I also have a real estate company, so it's in a building that I've been in control of since about 2004. And back in 2012, I approached my client because it was always hard to find an occupant for the building, and I told him I had an idea that I wanted to try out in there, and so he's done everything that he can to help me out and give me a good deal and keep me going in there. But one of these days he's going to want to do something big on that place, and he'll doze my site and build condos or something like that, because we're so close to the city. But I've been making the best of it in the meantime. I'll just kind of back up a little bit about my history. I was born and raised in Southern Oregon, and my family purchased some property out in rural West Medford back around 1978. And my father passed away in 76, and my dad was to gold fit. Well, my mother was to for at a little, and it also cannabis. And so we had a little organic farm, homestead out of their property, and raised steer, chickens, and rabbits, and all crop. And we had greenhouses that were hydroponic, and then pay the bills. My stepdad had an indoor grow operation, and so he produced cannabis with hydroponics, totally indoors. And that was probably around 79 around 79 or 80. And it was pretty cool about the whole thing. I never talked about it. It's kind of weird talking about it even now. But I kept it all quiet, down low, and I'd help him out whenever I could. I was always curious about what he was doing, and he was cool about things. He exposed me to the operations, so I knew what was going on, and I'd help with making the new solution. Sometimes I'd help him weigh things out and baggy things up, and sometimes I'd go along with him on deals. And so I had kind of an unusual upbringing, and so you know,
unless you live in Southern Oregon or Northern California, then it's a relatively normal upbringing.
That's right. Marty and I have a lot in common.
That's right.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so,
continue.
So anyways, you know, one of the problems he was having was that he was getting spider mites on his plants, on his indoor grows. And of course, he didn't want to spray them with pesticides. So he was doing research and alternatives, and he had come across some work that a couple scientists had done. I think they were out of UC Davis, and they were doing research on using predator mites to take care of spider mites. And so he contacted them. If I recall, he met with them. He got some samples of their predator mites and instructions on how to cultivate them. And he started raising the predator mites on bean plants, and then treating his plants with the spider mites, or with the predator mites. And then he got pretty good at breeding them. And he started a company called Nature's Control, and he started selling organic pest control, good bugs to fight bad bugs. That was around, I think that was around 1980 when he launched that company. And I'd help out on the phones. I'd answer the phone. I was about 10 years old, and I remember when he was giving me instructions on, you know, how to answer the phones, and I had to get up to speed on everything. I had to know about all the mites that we were selling, and how to use them, and be able to answer questions. And people would call in and they'd want brochures and things like that. But I remember him telling me what to do, and to not sound like a kid when I answered the phone. So, so
Nice.
here I am. I'm on the phones and taking down information. This is way pre-internet, sending out brochures and this kind of stuff. And I was, you know, at the time I was an expert on beneficial insects, you know, and there weren't a lot available at the time. And he would advertise in organic gardening in High Times. That's where most of the business would come from. And you know, that was pretty much the family business. He went, you know, completely legit as far as business goes, you know, just with that. And so there was still some cannabis production going on, but most of what was happening was legitimate business. And then he got into other kinds of beneficial insects, you know, ladybugs and praying mantises and pirate bugs and all those things. You guys know it all. And my
For some of our listeners are people that have seen my YouTube channel. You'll know a lot of the bugs, the beneficial bug series and all that stuff I did on my YouTube channel were bugs from Nature's Control, which is now still a family business, right, Drew?
Yeah, exactly. My youngest brother, Nathan, owns that company now, and they have a sister business too called Ladybug Indoor Gardens, and that's their retail gardening store. But Nature's Control is still the main beneficial insect business. The only thing that's really different now is that there's so many labs now that produce the insects that Nature's Control doesn't need to cultivate their own insects anymore. Where back in the day, that's what we had to do. And even you know, everything had to be raised in the house, and some things are really hard. You know, like your ladybugs are wild caught, you know, almost entirely. But yeah, Nathan owns that business now. He's my half brother, and his dad passed away about 4 years ago. But prior to that, I had put together a deal for Nathan to acquire the business. and to provide his dad with enough income to be able to retire, and for Nathan to be able to live on the business. And then his dad passed away, and and Nathan owns it outright now. So we grew up around this stuff. But I've always had a love for gardening, especially producing flowers. And then it was around 2011 I really ramped up getting into food production. And what inspired it was the meltdown of the nuclear power plants at Fukushima Daiichi. And I was following that pretty closely, and here in the Pacific Northwest, we're downwind. During World War II, the Japanese had launched fire bombs up into the atmosphere that were carried over into the jet stream, and their intent was to cause forest fires in the Pacific Northwest. And in some of these, they were called fuegos. They some of them came down in Southern Oregon. One landed down on South Peach Street, Marty, on a vacant lot that's still there. And
yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, and so when this was happening, I knew straight away that especially after Unit 3 detonated, and this big cloud of MOX fuel, plutonium, uranium, weapons grade went up into the atmosphere, I knew straight away that we were going to start getting fallout from it. And and I knew it was going to come down. It was going to come down in the rain. It was going to come down in the snow, and it was going to contaminate everything growing outside. And I started paying close attention to things. Like I knew, from my research, that it was going to show up in the milk supply first. And within a week, I mean, we had rains, and within a week, local milk was throwing off 70 CPMs on my Geiger counter, when just background radiation was 6 CPMs. So it was radioactive. And so I just, I realized I needed to really change the way that I live, but also, kind of shift my life's focus, what I was doing, and really, start to be aware of these environmental problems that we face, and all the health issues that come along with that. And I remember Chernobyl, back in '86, and that accident, that threw contamination, all around the globe. And so I decided to devote my life to sustainable agriculture at that point. Sorry, my dog is barking. Hold on a minute.
We love dogs.
All right, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I've got a Rottweiler named Roxy. She's 7.5 years old. It's a good girl. That's enough. So that's when I decided to launch the aquaponics farm, and it wasn't much of a stretch to get into aquaponics, given that my family was involved in hydroponic crop production and also raising tropical fish. And I mean, this was something that we should have put together a long time ago. I'm really surprised that we hadn't actually. And so I started messing around with that. And I think my first system was modeled after the designs from some guys up in Portland. I think it was Portland Purple Water that had they had some polybarrel systems. I actually have a system from one of their designs that was built about 6 years ago. I've made a lot of modifications to it, but it still runs on my patio and still cranks out food year round. I still keep that going. But I think that, what I have to share with everybody here is how not to do aquaponics, and also, some maybe some advice on if you're going to try to make money, growing crops with aquaponics. I think that you really haven't earned your stripes until you've killed a few hundred fish. And
we hear that a lot.
And I mean, I screwed up in so many ways. I think what really messed me up was when I was trying to find my way and learn as much as I could. And I was, looking around for examples to model my operation after. And of course, at the time, I ran across Growing Power, Will Allen's operation, and I ran across,
We
these
love that too.
yeah, and it was looking at that. It was really really cool what he was doing, and I was really fascinated with what he was doing. I wanted to emulate that as much as possible. And then and the other guys, Sweetwater, I think they were called. They were inspired by that as well, and they were trying to scale up Will Allen's operation. And so I was really inspired by that, and I thought, well, hey, this is cool. What if I could build this whole thing? I'm in this abandoned old warehouse, and I could build all this thing by recycling stuff. And so I put the word out, and a bunch of my buddies started donating lumber. And I have a friend who owns a concrete construction company, and he invited me out to his farmyard, and I piled up all this stuff. And then I had another buddy who was a construction contractor, and he'd been warehousing all kinds of lumber to build his dream home. And he was in the economy was in the shitter, and he didn't have any work, and he was being evicted, needed to get rid of all the lumber. So he gave me all the lumber, and then he committed suicide. Sorry to bring that into it, but he made a huge donation to my operation, and then he went and he put his head on the train tracks up in Eugene. And it was just a pretty desperate situation if you were a construction contractor around here at the time. And I wish I'd known how troubled he was. I had no idea. But anyways, and then I made some contacts with a local micro distillery, and those guys needed to get rid of. They just get all these IBC containers and polybarrel containers, and I was able to get these really cheap because they just wanted to get rid of them, and they were super clean. They'd had organic alcohol in them, and organic wine and things like that. And so I was able to score some of those. And then I have another buddy that deals in military surplus, and I was able to get containers from him that were these incredible fiberglass, like 300-gallon fiberglass containers that had been made by Boeing, and they still had stickers on them. The government purchased them from Boeing for almost $900 a piece, and I just got a bunch of these things for free, and was able to repurpose them. And so I started building my system with all these things that I had. And then I had, and I had another buddy who was an unemployed construction contractor. And so I hired him to help me start putting things together. And so, initially we modeled things very heavily after Growing Power and Sweetwater. And then I started realizing that I might have really screwed up when I started to watch some of the later videos coming out of Sweetwater. I'm sure some of you guys have seen them. Where they've got workers in there, and they've got little mini shop vacs, and they're shop vacuuming fish poop out of their troughs. And then they're trying to create microclimates within their massive warehouse that they were in. It had really, really high ceilings, and everything was framed up out of wood and pond liner and things like that. And then I noticed the video where they'd rolled out a bunch of ladybugs, and they weren't handling them properly. They were just kind of being really rough and showing them off by rubbing them around. And then I saw another video. I can't remember the guy's name now, but I remember he was just inundated in paperwork, and he was complaining, if I get through all this paperwork, because I think he'd signed up for all these government grants and whatnot. If I get through all this paperwork, I could get to farming. And that's when I really started to get suspicious, like, wow, this might be the wrong track here, because this is, you got to put your work, you got to put your work into your farm. You can't manage it from your desk, and you got to get out there. And so I started putting these things together and looking at that, and then looking at Will Allen's operation and realizing that he was operating with so many volunteers. and thinking that I might have screwed up. I'm not the kind of guy that goes, that signs up for grants and government handouts and that sort of thing. It's got to turn a profit, period. That's just it. And then about 2 years into it, my systems really started to fail. Things were the media beds, and these media beds are massive, tons and tons of rock in them. They're 18 inches deep, and they were starting to clog up with fish poop and starting to have flow problems, and the siphons stop working correctly, and all this. And then the tanks that I'd fabricated out of wood with pond liner really weren't designed in such a way to carry the waste out of them. So waste was starting to build up, within the tanks. And then sometimes if the light hit them, the waste would start to bubble up, and you'd get little gas explosions coming up out of the fish poop, and and started to have these these problems. And so that's when I had to start pivoting and redesigning systems. I'm at a point now where I'm really big on filtration. Everything has to be filtered. I like to have one of my favorite system has a swirl filter, and then it's got it goes through another filter that's a series of plates, and then it goes into a degassing tank, and then it goes into media bed, and then off from there. And I like that system's been a really good solid system. But I'm getting to the point where I'm trying to get completely away from media beds altogether. And it's one of those things. It's been a hard decision to make. I'm getting more into vertical production. And then, but the problem I have with the media beds is all the stuff that goes on inside of the media beds and all the labor that's involved in cleaning them out. Even after you've done a lot of filtration, you tend to get fungus gnats and thrips and these sorts of things in there. And so I've been, trying to get away from that as much as possible. So the next iteration of my farm will have very little, if any, media bed whatsoever, except when it comes to dual root zone stuff. And and I have to say that Steve really turned me on to that when I picked up your videos from Aquaponic Source a while back, and it was like that aha moment. And what I think is cool when you're doing that dual root zone is you could have a different biosphere in there too that you can't have in the media bed, where you got this thing flooding and draining, you got that little dry zone in there, but it might not be the happiest environment for say nematodes, predatory nematodes. And that's what I like about having that media layer in there, is that you could have your beneficial pest control down there in that root zone as like a barrier. And that's really something to think about as far as integrated pest management goes. So if you're gonna do media beds, I'm really pro dual root zone type of thing, just from that standpoint.
I think that what is important to say right here, though, is the reason you're going the direction you're going is because you're growing greens, microgreens, and and such like that. If you're not growing tomatoes, that's your business is microgreens, so you can go vertical. It's the dual root zone is not as important to you.
I think dual root zone is really important because
okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say it that way, but
and with tomatoes, I love doing dual root zone tomatoes. I do it with cannabis, peppers. I think it's great, but I think it's important because you've got all the benefits of the dual root zone, as far as your nutrients go, and making sure that you've got all your bases covered with the nutrients. But from a pest control standpoint, I think it's really important too. So I think that, you see, like you get on Murray Hallam's site, and you see these guys building out these massive greenhouses with all these media beds. And it scares the hell out of me when I see that. And I think, oh my God, and
What would they do if they got root aphids?
Yeah.
Lots of humidity, so much humidity from all those beds. Yeah.
Yeah. But Steve, I mean, you've totally
They would
nailed it.
cry. That's what they would do. They would
Yeah.
cry.
They would cry and throw their hands up in the air and
Yes,
go, I don't know what to do. And we
Top their tanks with tears.
we had that same problem in the media beds in the showroom at Aquaponic Source at one point. Someone introduced a really vicious variety by accident, just randomly. One of the people waltzing through the place spread it to the showroom, or the lady that was taking care of the showroom brought it in on one of the herbs that she bought at the nursery. I was growing everything from seed. She brought some stuff in. Anyways.
Oh,
man. So we had this vicious root aphid, and what we ended up doing was we ended up introducing about 3 different types of beneficial nematodes, and we found one that actually would totally survive in the media beds, and that ended up working really well.
Do you remember the variety?
I have a big chart that I put together, and I'm going to be releasing.
Of course you do.
Sweet.
It's going to be released publicly later in the year, along with as like a part of like a broader suggested IPM list for everyone. I guess at some point they're going to be starting to regulate us, so it's a really cool list I've been working on. It's not finished yet. I'm still adding other states' white lists and stuff, but the beneficial insects things done. So if anyone ever has a question, shoot me an email. I can answer your question, but I will be doing a presentation later in the year on that specific topic for the Aquaponics Association.
Definitely looking forward to it, and and I think that we're on the right track then, as that goes, because I do think it's important, with some types of crops, flowering crops especially, where you're using media bed in a way, but I think blending it with the dual root zone, it just completely expands your ecosystem.
Okay, so even if you're a commercial grower, for instance, at Ouroboros, they have about 40% of the production is media beds and 60% is the rafts. And it works really good for hybridizing that mineralization, just like you're saying, but he also has a bunch of little tiny beneficial shrimps, like fairy shrimps or scud shrimps. They're not the kind that eat the roots of the plants, they're just detrivores. And there's probably 8 billion of them in the media beds along with the worms. I mean, you stick your hand in and your hands are just covered in the worms and the thing, and there's no muck, there's no fish waste, there's no nothing. It's just clear,
all broken down.
It's all broken down immediately.
Yeah. That's awesome.
The other thing that too is we've been doing work too with the lactobacillus. Sorry. Actually, Joe Pate was the guy down in Kentucky State, did a really big study on that with the lactobacillus, showing how not only did it increase the plant growth, it increased fish growth rate by 15%, because it increased the microbiome of the fish's gut and made them pack on more fat.
Incredible.
Really cool.
Wow, lactobacillus is everywhere.
Oh yeah.
It should be pretty easy to get that going.
Oh yeah.
It should be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Make your labs. Go check out Chris Trump's his channel. That's the other thing I was going to mention for beneficial insects. Susan Wainwright Evans is actually going to be at the Science of Regenerative Aquaponic Cultivation Conference. Josh and his long names for events.
You need a few more words in there. I don't think that's long enough.
Steve was egging him on last week after the show. Steve was egging him on. He made it even longer. I think they added a
central.
No, he wanted it to be even longer, and I
Oh man.
No. So the other thing is, so we're gonna be throwing a Dude Grows show. Because Marty complained, Bay Area nug throwdown.
Thank you.
Even though everyone else is going to call it NorCal.
I'm glad you checked the map. I appreciate that.
No,
I appreciate that you checked the map. That's good.
It's important to pay attention to the clarifying of the
all of our listeners. It'll be just outside of Half Moon Bay. The details of the exact location will be released closer to the event, only to ticket holders. It's not open to the public. It's strictly for people from the show, people from the DGC. And we're going to be throwing a big party. It's going to be really affordable. I don't have the final pricing, but it's going to be something that anybody can afford. It's going to be less than $40 $40 or less, I would say, unless we have something last minute come up. So anybody that can come down. So if you guys are looking to come down, any of you guys that always want to get together and you can make it, we're just outside of San Francisco. It'll be July 21st, and we'll have a big throwdown with a bunch of the DGC and a bunch of the aquaponic cannabis growers. And it'll be at a really, really awesome location. We have it for the whole day. And we're going to have a big contest and stuff. And we'll have some people there and some vendors there, and we're going to have a good time. So definitely check it out, and we'll have more details on that posted up soon. Scotty and I are finalizing some stuff on that. So, but yeah.
Oops, sorry about that.
No worries. Just sorry, I didn't mean to
Roxy.
totally, interject there. I just
Roxy's interjecting here.
So
He's
tell
all
us
fired
more
up.
about tell us more about your operation. What different types of crops do you grow?
So I get into some of the other things. What I wanted to do was have a very sustainable operation. And I know that initially I was like going along the lines of permaculture, but when you start playing around with aquaponics, you go off on tangents, and so I don't really like to frame myself in. And, I like to be able to experiment a lot, but I try to be as sustainable as possible. And so, I started cultivating the black soldier flies along with my worms back in 2012. I got a starter colony of black soldier fly larvae from a professor up at Portland State University named Radu Popa. He was affiliated with Diptera at the time, but I think he's moved on. And so he was in Ashland and stopped in and basically gave me a bucket of maggots and to get things started. And I've been growing black soldier flies ever since. And then I made what I started doing was I started working with my restaurant customers. I sell solely to restaurants. And I got them going on what I call a bucket exchange. And so I'd come in to give them their delivery, and I'd bring them a clean bucket, and they'd give me their bucket of their pre-consumer kitchen waste from their prep that they'd keep in their walk-in, and they'd happily give it to me. And they like to brag about this stuff, and they'd to their customers, that we recycle this, we don't throw it in the dumpster. And then I'd feed that to the soldier flies. And I'd have some customers that prepared seafood. And so on Fridays, I'd get a bucket of shrimp legs that I'd shuck those, and I'd feed those to the fish, and they just absolutely devour them. They totally loved it. And then I made a deal with a local company that produces organic kimchi and sauerkraut, and they produce tons and tons of scraps, and their shop is close to mine. So I started working with them to pick up their scraps and to put them into my system. So, at the peak, I was running about 2 tons of waste from those guys in a month. It's a lot of material. It's a lot of work. Backbreaking. It's something that needs to be automated. And but when you're an older guy like me, it's very backbreaking, and most of the boxes are about 70 pounds, and you're just chucking dozens and dozens of these things. It's a lot of work, but you could convert about 25% of that material into larval mass and use that for supplemental fish feed. But it's seasonal. I've run them through the winter just to keep them going. But it's very expensive where we are. We have some very cold winters, and so it's expensive to keep them going in the winter. So I got to where what I do in the winter is I cycle them down, and I'll keep I'll operate smaller bins that I'll keep going on heat mats, and they'll keep going. They'll keep feeding, but it's very slow, so that they're not going into their pre-pupa state right away, and I can keep them rolling until spring, and then I could ramp things up, and they'll pupate and self-harvest into their bin, and then we just start the season over again. And then through that I developed a product that I call the black soldier fly compost bin inoculator, which is this. It's just this little square of material that I hatch out the larva on, and I worked with my brother Nathan at Nature's Control to figure out a way to be able to ship these guys live and guarantee live delivery. And so that's a product when I have excess that I usually sell in spring and early summer, and I've had really enjoyed doing some deals with some vineyards that have wanted to get into permaculture, and they wanted to process their grape pomace with the soldier flies to generate chicken feed. And so I've had some nice trades, where I've sent off some, little microscopic maggots and got, shipments of boxes of wine. And so that's, maggots into wine. How does it get any better than that, right?
That's great, building a network. I think the important thing there is to say you built a network, to make it so you have a barter system going,
Yeah, exactly. You get all this going and it's sustainable. With the soldier flies, one thing I want to point out to people if they get into this, and this is in Sylvia's book, she covers soldier flies, and Murray has covered soldier flies. But you don't want to feed them the pupa. They don't like the pupa. They're not going to eat the pupa. You want the pupa to hatch so that you could breed more flies. The shell of the puparium is made out of chitin, and I have a friend, Maximus Breitensteiner, who's done a lot of research along these lines, and he found that it would that the chitin would slow down the growth rate of the fish. And so you want to feed the fish the larva when they're squishy, when they're larvae. So they like that. They like the larva. And you've got about 67% protein, and the rest is lipids. And so again, this is just supplemental. It's really hard to just feed your fish solely on that, and I don't think it's necessarily healthy to just feed them solely on that. One thing I wanted to get into too is the types of fish that I raise. One problem that I had with my site is that it's really close to Ashland Creek, and the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife were very particular about what I was doing on that site, and it was going to be very challenging to transport certain species of fish there, and they absolutely did not want tilapia on the site. They didn't want any Mozambique tilapia at all. And, and they didn't want anything else cool like tiger prawns or anything like that. So they were giving me a really hard time. I asked for a meeting with a state biologist, and he came to my shop, and we hung out a few times. And I just made the case, I told him about the state of this planet. I went over all the issues, with him, as far as sustainability goes. And I kind of freaked the guy out, and he finally switched gears, and he goes, "All right, Drew," he goes, "what do you need from me? How can I help you do this?" And I said, "Well, I need you to help me figure out which species of fish that I could raise that will meet my criteria. They gotta do well in the aquaponics system. They need to taste good and be marketable. And you need to be comfortable with the fact that I'm cultivating these fish." And so he thought about it, and he came back to me, and he said, "Okay," he goes, "I think you should try black crappie, bluegill, brown bullhead catfish, and largemouth bass, and you could do trout too if you want." And I said, "Okay." So I started running with everything but the trout, of course, because they need really cool temperatures, pristine water, and I didn't want to run that from the get go, and it gets hotter than hell in my shop. And so we started out. So I started out with those. the first guy that sold me bluegill sold me a bunch of bluegill that had ick, and totally messed up my system. So I had to fight that off. That was just straight out of the gate. I found that the mature bluegill were almost impossible to train to take prepared feeds, and the crappie, they would only eat worms. That was the only thing that you couldn't feed them anything else but worms. And so the crappie were the first ones that I had to stop cultivating. It was just a super huge pain in the neck to raise the black crappie, and they were picky eaters and they grew very slowly. The bluegill fry, if you start them out as fry, you could train them, and then once you train them, they'll eat anything. And the catfish and the largemouth bass were great too. One thing I didn't expect was that that the catfish would be the most marketable of all the fish. That those would be the ones that I could readily make a market for, and that I could sell the most of. The chefs really like the catfish, and the catfish have done great in the systems. And I actually on my YouTube channel for Pyramid Pure Foods, I have a series of videos on how to breed the catfish in aquariums. And I don't know, people keep telling me I'm the only guy out there that's showing people how to do that. I doubt it, but anyways, I've got some videos that steps you through how to breed brown bullhead catfish in aquariums if you want to get into that. I really recommend it, and I found that they're easy to raise. They propagate quickly. They're flexible eaters. They'll eat pretty much anything you throw at them, and they're super tasty. They just taste amazing. Go ahead. You had a question?
Are they indigenous to Oregon?
Well, they were brought here, but now they're pretty much in every body of water around here. They're all
okay, so they become indigenous.
Yeah. So that's why the ODFW guy was cool with it. But then again, they said to me, they're like, listen, we don't want your fish, your fry, your water, your eggs. We don't want anything going down your drain or flowing out to the curb, or going into the creek. And so they're like, well, you got to do this and that. And I'm in this old building that was used for food production. So it's got floor sinks in it that go out to the sewer. It's close to the creek. And so I was trying to figure out what to do. So I screened those off, and then I built containment around my fish rearing area, which was basically a concrete curb around that floor space.
That's a great idea. So you had a reservoir with a space outside of it, like a channel or a moat with a curb out.
Exactly. And I was thinking, I wonder if this will fly. So the guy comes over to meet with me again, and he says to me, he goes, well, if you crashed a forklift into that tank and all the water spilled out, what did you calculate the volume? Can it handle all that water? And I was like, yes, sir, I did. And he's like, that was the right answer. And that was it. He signed off on it. And so I was able to get my permits to have fish brought out to my site. So yeah, huge pain in the ass. There's really no way in hell fish could actually, from my site, get into Ashland Creek. It just wouldn't happen. But anyways, you jump through the hoops and you could do it. But the big problem was, last year, the feds the USDA enacted some new regulations for catfish cultivation, and so they want all this BS you got to do if you're gonna raise catfish, and you gotta build a lab for the USDA employees to hang out in and monitor you and test your water and test your culture water, test the water you're delivering in. Another thing too is that they require you to deliver your fish live to your customer, but that's actually against the law in Oregon, unless the site you're delivering the fish to has been inspected and has received a permit to receive the fish. But if that's a restaurant, well, that's not going to happen. They're not designed for that, but they are authorized to process the fish. One thing I want to point out is that I don't play well with government. And so what I try to do is I've tried to design my business so that instead of breaking rules, the rules don't apply to me. And so I don't process anything. I don't package anything. Everything's live. Everything's delivered live. And even down to my microgreens, I developed a microgreen product that's delivered live. It's not harvested; they harvest it, and so that's how I've had to do it. And with my fish, I harvest them into. I might change my style here after watching that video that Steve posted on your Facebook last night. That article actually on killing fish, but I usually harvest my fish into an ice slurry. And then I just, I bring them over to the chefs, live in a cooler, and they're just dormant, and they process them and they love it. They think it's the coolest thing in the world. And, and I call it the hyper local catch of the hour. So
I got to speak up for Josh here, because Josh had his business for years and he delivered his microgreens to the chefs in a live environment. He took the grow medium and they got the whole thing, and then they harvested it live. Like you just said, that's interesting. We were just talking about that a week or so ago, and then now you're saying, I assume that's what you did. You just take the whole thing into a container and give it to them, and then they clip the live. Actually, they're still growing right there in their kitchen.
Yeah, exactly. And what I did,
that's a pretty good way. I like that.
Yeah, and so that what I call the microgreen machine is kind of a modified NFT setup. Marty's seen it, and I don't use trays. I'll give you guys some tray secrets here. I use food grade polypropylene grid, and then I put BioStraight over the top of it, and then I cultivate on that on a decoupled system. And I like the way it works. It works really good. I get a good product out of it. And then what I do is my favorite product is a blend of radishes, and I like the radish blend because you get a high yield, you get a lot of color from the blend. You want a nice color variation in stem and leaf color. You want kind of a spicy snap to it, and the chefs want a lot of yield, and you get that with the radish. It's kind of like the best of all the worlds. And another thing is with the radish, it'll grow in a variety of temperatures. So if you don't have perfect climate control in your grow space, you can keep that going. I like to maintain my water temperature, within a certain range, but my air temperature will fluctuate quite a bit. But I could crank that product out consistently. It's just in the winter, my turn will change from like 1 week to 2 weeks. And that's still fast, and that's okay. So I've liked going that route with it. So what another thing too is that as I've gotten into sustainable agriculture, I've been trying to blend that into my other interest, which is startup societies. Basically, walking away from certain government systems that you don't like, and being able to form a new system, create a new society, a different place. And and a lot of work I've done has been with the creation of trying to create the Jefferson Republic in Siskiyou County, California. Marty's aware of this thing we've been working on. It's kind of like the state of Jefferson, but a little bit smaller. And last August, I attended the Startup Society Summit down in San Francisco, and I'd been reading a book called Seasteading by Joe Quirk and Patri Friedman, and I'd been following seasteading, for about 6 years or so, and it was just this idea where you could basically create a new land, a new place, an experiment with different governing systems, whatever you thought, you want to do. And so I've been following this for quite some time. And then Joe and Patri released their book, and I was reading their book. And when I was at the summit, I decided I wanted to try to find Joe Quirk and meet him. And, and I tracked him down and cornered him, introduced myself, and told him I was into sustainable agriculture and had some ideas about producing crops sustainably on seasteads. And then he put me in touch with a company they'd started called Blue Frontiers, and these guys are working on building basically floating cities with varying government structures. And so shortly after joining their food systems team, I became the lead of their food systems work group. And then after we were finished with our research and our ideas, I became the lead of their food systems project. And so Blue Frontiers now is raising. They're doing some funds now to get things going, and they're doing what's called an ICO. So they have a cryptocurrency utility token called Varion, and if you purchase Varion, that allows you to engage in the Blue Frontiers ecosystem. And so what we're working on right now is to construct our first seasteads in French Polynesia. So there's a few sites that we're evaluating. And my team, I have a team of geniuses. I'm not one of the geniuses, but I have a team of geniuses. And we've been developing the food systems. How do we feed everybody sustainably on these platforms? And our primary mission is to use waste as a resource. That's really what we're trying to do. And I mean, we even have to try to make use of our yellow water and gray water streams. We have to deal with human poop even, and figure out how to safely deal with that and use that as a resource. And so this has been an incredible application of everything that I've learned in my work in sustainable agriculture. And so hopefully very, very soon we'll start rolling these things out. And what's really cool too is that these things that we're developing can be deployed in other places. It doesn't have to be on an artificial floating island. It could be in any coastal community. It could be in a place like Puerto Rico, that's been completely destroyed by a hurricane and has no infrastructure. It's a perfect place to come in and set up systems for water and power and sustainable food production and waste management and all these things. And what we hope to do is have systems where we could come in, and they're modular systems, and be able to roll these out. And another cool thing too about these seasteads is that to make these work, what we do is that we interface with the government to create a special economic zone within the host government. Like say, within French Polynesia, you have like a host island, and you create a special economic zone, kind of like Hong Kong or Shenzhen, where the government's more hands off and they let you do different things. And so, because to make this work, you have to have an economy. You can't just have a bunch of people. And the point isn't to have like a bunch of rich people like show up and buy these floating islands. You have to have an economy. But this opens up the doors for say you're doing cancer research with cannabis. You want to do a bunch of things. And if you're in the United States, you probably can't do it. And so if you're in one of our special economic zones, well, you could do it. And you ought to do it. And so this creates very interesting opportunities for innovation and for people basically to make choices for themselves. I mean, like maybe you'll have an island where people just want to drink raw milk, raw milk island. Like we want to drink unregulated raw milk. And I don't know, maybe they'll have a platform with a bunch of dairy cows. I'm just making this up. I don't know anybody that wants to do this, but I'm just saying as an example. You could do something like that. And so it's just that the whole thing is for people to be able to choose the governing system that they want to live under. And if you don't like it, you could just hitch up your platform and get a tugboat and pull it over to another one where you agree with the people over there. Or maybe you just want to be by yourself and be king of your own island, and you could do that too. So,
well, isn't it kind of like just a biodome on a barge?
Essentially, and you could do something like that. My first plan, I was pitching this to a buddy of mine down in Chile, who's working on a startup society called Fort Galt, and so they're building this this community where they're trying to attract like-minded people, and their economy will be basically incubating businesses in a within a makerspace environment, and so yeah, I mean, you're doing something like that. And the other thing too is that the next step for these things that we're working on is going into space. Mars missions and lunar colonies, space stations, and this sort of thing. This work that we do is very relevant to these things coming up in the future. But first, we have all this ocean on this planet. And people think that this planet's overpopulated, and they're freaking out with climate change and sea level rise, and we're coming to the table and we're saying, well, we have a solution for the sea level rise. We could create more land, more coastline, and also through sustainability, we're going to be able to prove that the planet has a much greater sustaining power. That maybe this planet could hold, say, 9 billion people or something like that, and without creating a living hell. That we could have a great place to live without ruining the planet, and the goal with the seasteads is to not just be carbon neutral, but to be carbon negative, and also to do things like provide more food and resources in places like French Polynesia. Can we bring more food, reduce imports? We're working with technology companies where we're going to be bringing in like fatter data pipelines so that they're more interconnected, and also cleaning up the ocean. There are things that we can do to phyto extract contaminants from the ocean, pull carbon out of the atmosphere, sequester carbon in microalgae, things like this. Interesting thing that we're working on is to take our wastewater, process it through algae bioreactors, and then biodigest the algae to generate power. And then one of the generators we're considering is called a Quincy generator, and we could take the Quincy generator output CO2, and we could just pump that into one of our grow structures. It was really interesting listening to Steve, where he was talking about the challenges, of growing, on the equator, and that's something I've been having to work on. Where on one of our sites, we're looking at is at about -17 degrees, so we're really close, and we've got this problem with all this light, and also we have reflection coming off the ocean, so we have solar saturation, and then we have salt spray. And then we've got design criteria too, where we want to have trees and ornamental plants on the platforms, and to be able to make that work. And one of my visions has been to use like a Dutch bucket style design coupled with the aquaponics and some of our yellow and gray water systems to keep those going. But we still have these challenges, with how do we deal with the saltwater spray, and and can we incorporate other plants that could halophytes, say salicornia or something like that could phyto extract that salt, so that we don't run into a problem. So it's an interesting challenge. It's been a lot of fun working on this, and it's going to be pretty incredible to see it working. If anybody wants to check out what we're doing, you can go to blue-frontiers.com. And you could also search that on YouTube. We've got a YouTube channel, and we're also on Telegram. Most of the stuff about the ICO is on Telegram. So if you want to check that out. But so my company is Pyramid Pure Foods, is a strategic partner with Blue Frontiers, and what I'm hoping to do is pivot my operation into being what I call a hub for blue agritech, where we're going to be doing lots of R&D around sustainable agriculture that will be deployed on these floating platforms. So it's really incredible, this direction that we're going in at this point.
That's incredible. There's so much you went on and talked through that I honestly can't believe that a lot of what you've talked about and you're trying to develop is I have a lot of the same kind of thoughts and beliefs, and would like to see that kind of things. Well, especially with working with the salt water. That's the one thing I'm intrigued with, is attempting to work, through some kind of deal where you can be have salt water in with an aquaponics type kind of situation or whatever, and with a different environment and
you
all.
can, you could do polyculture. And so you could do fish and shellfish, and you could do seaweed and this sort of thing using polyculture. And this is something that we're working on. People always ask me, when people find out I'm leading food systems, they almost all, I get two questions people always ask me. One is, are you going to be harvesting fish straight out of the ocean, wild caught? No way, we're not going to do that. The other question is, well, what about the vegans? Well, we're going to be growing lots and lots of vegetables. There's going to be
you have to work through that. Let's grow food first, and we'll worry about everybody with their little idiosyncrasies.
But yeah, I mean, you're out there in the ocean, and so there's all these opportunities. Like, for example, you can cultivate seaweed on ropes out there in the ocean.
Well, here's everybody on the show knows, but I'm dying to create a system where I can create not automated, but one of our a culture where I can grow pistachio nuts.
Oh, wow.
Oh. And that's in a saltwater tidal basin. Basically, it's like an ebb and flow. It's grown naturally in an ebb and flow. It's
no kidding.
Tree that grows in a tidal basin, and it's dry and it's wet, and it's dry and it's wet. Every time the tide comes in.
Right.
And so I said, well, that sounds like something that'd be. And I talked to everybody about it. And now, there are some people that are messing with it. But I haven't found anybody. I have piqued some people's interest on the show, because that's what. But see, when I talk to you and hear what you're doing now, and you're talking about using the ocean. Well, now you're in the salt water. Yeah.
My initial approach was that we were only going to do saltwater systems, period, because we're out on the ocean. But I started getting feedback from people, and they wanted different things, and so and also, on these projects, with our first project, we'll have an anchor zone where we'll actually be starting out on land near our site, where we'll go out into the ocean. And so, on that anchor zone, we'll most likely be dealing with freshwater aquaponics and hydroponics. And so it ends up being part of the thing and incorporated into it. And then just gauging from what people wanted, they were asking me, well, can we do this? Well, it's not my first choice to be growing freshwater fish on a platform in the ocean, but yes, we can do it. I'd rather just be doing saltwater stuff, but we can do this. And
I don't see a big problem for protecting the fish from spray. Almost like you're going to have, like I said, you're going to have almost like a dome kind of thing, or
So what we've come up
for the fresh, and then you'll have that saltwater culture outside.
So what we're coming up with are designs for floating autonomous robotic greenhouses. So and so we've been working on. Actually, this has been coming out of my operation with my cohort, and so we're coming out with these designs, and it's not the easiest thing to come up with, because you're out there on the ocean, and there's a lot of problems you need to deal with. But see, one of the biggest challenges that we face with the seasteading is that the cost of our real estate right now is really high. And you typically don't grow your crops on your most prime expensive real estate. So
and that's because you're starting on the beach before you go out.
Yeah, so we're like creating like premium real estate,
right?
But we still want to be, self-sustaining. So we've had to come up.
If you're right, that's going to really pay off in the end. Have that beachfront property.
Right, exactly. Yeah, or just building a bunch of beachfront property. But so we've got to have the autonomous greenhouses out there and constructed in an inexpensive way. And so, we're doing, a lot of research along the lines of robotics, and I do a lot of work with sensors, microcontrollers, and this sort of thing, for things like monitoring my systems and collecting data. But we have to like take it a step further, even with that, with like, automated harvesting, that sort of thing, and to limit the amount. Well, it'll be a little bit risky working inside of these structures, and so you want to plus with with your integrated pest management system. I mean, you want to try to keep people out of your grow space as much as possible. So we're working on a lot of automation, but we have it's super challenging when you're trying to like grow enclosed in the tropics. You want to keep that sea spray off, but you've got that, all this light, solar saturation. You got the light coming down on top of you. You got the light reflecting off the water. It's a lot of light. So you actually need more shade. You need some shading, temperature control.
Well, you got water that's cooler. You got water that you can use. Put some, if you're out, if you're anchored or whatever you're talking about, I think you're talking about being in a spot, then you go down deep enough, you get cool water to filter through.
Exactly.
You have radiant heating through that cool water.
Exactly.
From depths, depth of the ocean. Right. Yep. I see Steve's back. We're talking about radiant heating here.
I was just gonna say, how do you deal with storms?
Yeah, the hurricane issue is common. We get that all of the time, and so we have to design for that. And it's something that my team discusses all the time. I have a couple guys on my team who are experienced with growing in the tropics and hurricane prone areas, and so we have to, that's part of our design criteria is that things that we build, whether it's for the residences or for the greenhouses, they have to be able to withstand a hurricane.
Do you think you're going to tie them down similar like you would an oil platform? Is that what your thoughts are, or do you have a new technology?
Well, you've got things, how it's moored is really important. Also, the shape of the structure is super important, and there's other things you have to consider too, which is this vacuum that's created that basically causes things to just blow to pieces, and so you have to design the thing. I mean, this is something we're really thinking about. Like if you're going to build like a greenhouse within that environment, I mean, you typically go along the lines of like a tropical vented greenhouse or an NVAC type of design, where you've got like water misting to cool and driving the heat out the top, but also that kind of the shape lends itself to being ripped apart by a hurricane. And so you look at dome structures, they seem to be possibly better at that. And then on the other side of things, we have a technology partner who's very interested in just freight farming, container growing in freight containers, which of course is totally hurricane proof, but I mean, it's more energy intensive, of course.
Now, what about the fact that go ahead, Steve.
Pedro in Puerto Rico actually had his shipping containers thrown directly through his greenhouse.
Yes.
Oh wow! No kidding! Wow.
Yeah. We had a guy, one of Steve's friends came on the show and talked all about hooking up a whole bunch of grow containers together to build his infrastructure.
I love that piece of information, man.
They didn't survive, but that was Puerto Rico, and that was a direct hit from a Category 5. So.
Pretty intense. Wow. Yeah, that's
My thoughts on it though is if you're going to develop this where there's a whole bunch, what are we looking at for impact? Now I have to go to looking at, like you said, you were trying to do something for the earth, right? So I have this thought though is what's the impact of drilling for mooring or from attaching all these and messing up at different intervals if we had a community, all these the floor of the ocean out there?
Well,
Could be
yeah,
drilling. You know, I mean, in the
right,
gas.
right. Well, you know, we do have to do environmental studies when we're making pitches to these governments, and you know, so they come back and they want another thing too is we don't want to mess things up. And like we don't want to ruin the coral reef, you know, in a lagoon that's hosting us or something like that.
Right, and I'm not attacking you either. I'm just saying that it's worth
Well,
it.
actually,
it's the topic we're talking about. So.
Well, actually, at one of our sites, like we can't go into we can't mess up the bottom of the lagoon. We can't do anything to it.
Right. Okay.
So anyways, you know, what you're talking about is having, you know, an adequate amount of like ballast to basically stick you in place, you know, so that you're not going to be moved around. You're not going to be rocked around. And
so you're just going to anchor like a boat.
Yes.
A ship.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And we have some architects out of the Netherlands called Blue 21. And these guys, they design these things and then they wave test everything in this giant tank to see what's going to happen. And so, you know, that's kind of driving the design right there.
That's a good answer right there, because they've been dealing with floods, with all that, you know, they still have some pins, you know, anchored in there, but you know, things fluctuate and they go up, but they're really good on that technology to deal with that kind of situation.
They were good with cannabis technology and they were good with seastead technology.
Yeah. But they're surrounded by water, you know.
Something good's happening over there. It must be that being close to the water is good for you.
Great genetics. Oh, that's all.
Yeah. Really cool to work with those guys. And they're super interested in what my team brings to the table with sustainable agriculture, and in particular with the algae bioreactors. And so this is like a whole new direction for me, you know, with like, you know, usually like you don't want algae, and here you are, you know, wanting to grow algae and going out of your way to do it. So, you know, so that's what you know, I think algae will be driving most of our wastewater processing.
Well, that's what I've been wanting to do. We've talked about that on the show too. That's one of my kicks, because, you know, a lot of what everybody on the show is involved in is they don't just grow fish and grow cannabis, or, you know, or like do aquaponics or grow cannabis. They have big vegetable farms, you know, and produce farms.
Right.
And also, you know, we're finding, like you're talking about the soldier flies, and you know, and the way you keep providing, you know, for those and protecting the environment around your grow, and so.
So one of the things I've been doing with the soldier flies, I started this experiment last summer. Is I've been feeding them a variety of macroalgae, of seaweed. So I've been feeding them about 5 different varieties of seaweed to see what the heck happens. So if we're growing seaweed off of wastewater from our systems, can I take that seaweed and feed it to the soldier flies to generate fish food? And you know, and so far I'm convinced that I can, at least for supplemental fish food. And so they'll eat it. You know, there is a point, I'm not sure yet, you know, where, you know, if there's a point where salt levels become toxic, you know, to the larva. I haven't crossed that threshold, you know, yet. I don't know if there is a threshold there. You know, it's possible that there are, and maybe I might want to mix up their food inputs to make sure that something like that doesn't happen. And so, you know, another thing that we get into, you know, is people want to know what we're going to do with our poop. And so I have a guy, and this is his specialty. And so he's developed these urine diverting dry toilets. Chris Canaday out of Ecuador. So he's the expert in urine diverting dry toilets. So I tell you, I mean, most of our discussions, you know, regarding seasteading has been about, you know, how we're going to go to the bathroom. What's our toilet technology going to be? And we've literally been designing these things from the toilet up, you know, because this is really a big deal. Usually this sort of thing is an afterthought, you know, like I know, like where Marty and I live, my grandfathers would tell me, well, back in the day, you know, all the sewers just went right into Bear Creek and out to the Rogue River. Well, now everything goes down the drain
Now,
and out to the Rogue River. But but anyways, so what we're trying to do is like we're designing from this point, like how do we keep our waste from going out there into the environment? And what can we do with it? So the urine diverting dry toilets is really key. And then basically you you divert the urine goes one way, the poop goes the other, and then you basically compost that poop for 6 months, and after 6 months, anything nasty's is gone. Any kind of
I thought it was a year. So you think I thought my research, because I'm all good with this research. It's proven, no doubt about it. You just have to be open minded. But what do you say, Steve?
It's in the tropics. It's faster. Well, I can make.
Because it's hotter all the time. Okay. All right. So all right.
In Jamaica, I can make compost in 30 days with a trash bag.
But not human compost, though, huh?
Yeah, and Chris is a biologist, so I have to trust him on this. When he says 6 months.
Okay. I just but don't forget, you're in that. You've got 12 hours of heat every day.
Yeah. Yeah, and so basically what you end up with is just kind of this powdery dirt. Another thing too is that instead of like flushing that, mixing it with your potable water or whatever, you basically have some already processed material that you sprinkle over it, and it's got everything in there to start working on that. All your enzymes and microbes, they're going to start processing that material and breaking it down into dirt. And some people have been creeped out by the idea that we might use that for crop production, and we don't have to use it for crop production. We could use it for our ornamental plants, because we want these environments to feel natural. And we could use that, for like dual root zone with our fruit trees or ornamental trees or with our flowers and things like this. And so, if people have problems, accepting that we might be growing, potatoes like Matt Damon or something like that.
You read my mind. I was thinking, like if you're on Mars, you're going to be growing your food and poop. Okay.
Right. Ultimately, we got to go with what we have to work with, but, you have limited resources, but at the same time, you don't want to be turning people off. And of course, you don't ever want to make anybody sick. And,
for sure.
Yeah. So anyways, these are things that we're working on, closing loops, being carbon negative, cleaning things up instead of messing things up, is what we're trying to do, with these seasteads, and live as freely as possible. Or not freely, if that's what you're into. You could have your tyrannical platform as long as you don't bug the other folks,
Yeah, so you can be vegan, if you want to be vegan, like you said.
I run across a lot of vegans in this circle, and this is, I run into a lot of libertarian-minded people. We call ourselves voluntarists. And
so you claim to be a libertarian then?
I'm beyond libertarian. I'm a voluntarist. Yeah.
Voluntarist, all right.
Yeah. All human interaction should be voluntary and free of coercion, except except in self-defense. That's okay. Violence is okay in self-defense, but otherwise,
I agree. I love that.
But otherwise, no coercion. Yeah, and people can make decisions for themselves.
That just goes back to live and let live, right? Yeah.
Pretty much the golden rule, really. And
live and let live, do unto others. And,
exactly.
And then, but you don't come and steal my sheep.
Exactly. And it works pretty good until you get over like maybe 200 people. When you get over that threshold, then things get all screwed up, and you've got, special interests, and you've got the crooked people that are trying to like benefit themselves at the expense of everybody else. And you get that kind of junk going on. But with the smaller community, almost everybody's voices can be heard. If somebody's corrupt, it's going to be exposed pretty quickly and dealt with. And, it's a better way, to organize yourself.
World, right?
Well, maybe not perfect. I don't think you could ever achieve a utopia. However,
I'm messing with you.
Well, one thing I'd like to say is people always go, well, you guys are trying to create a utopia. Well, we're trying to create a bluetopia, not a utopia. And I think it's utopian when people think that government could completely provide for everybody, you know, that you could put all your faith in government kind of like Santa Claus or something, you know, could just like bring you everything. And I think that's a utopian concept. But I'm kind of going off into the weeds here.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you in there.
Well, I think as far as weed goes, I mean, we've had to deal with all this for a long time, and we're starting to get out of this where we could see. Yeah. But also it's coming full circle where we're going, okay, well, we have less government regulation that's allowing us to grow a certain thing, but that at the same time, we're seeing the unintended consequences that go along with letting the government control and regulate a substance, which is what's happening now. So I have a tenant at some commercial property that I operate that operates a dispensary and a farm, he cultivates cannabis on a commercial scale. And I remember when I first met him years ago, and I was like, buddy, are you sure you want to do this? If you screw up, you're in big trouble. And they're going to be like changing these regs all the time. It's going to be hard. And he's always in a pickle, and we're always in a pickle. We had our lender came down on us and said, we're calling your loan. We want $5 million right now, because we have to abide by federal regulations, and you guys have a dispensary in there. And, and that took a lot of work to work that out, and it's never completely settled. And then this guy, he didn't file a certain piece of paperwork within, the proper period of time. And then his license is on the table, they're, waiting for an enforcement officer's decision. And so, this kind of stuff, we're kind of to the point now where we can see the unintended consequences of making these deals with the government, and going, okay, well, let me do this, and I'll submit to this and this and this. And maybe that's worse than when it was totally illegal. Maybe it was, we're seeing that. And I hope we see some pushback. Another thing that I don't like is where people go, well, if you tax it, it's okay. Well, how come like something's a crime, but as soon as you could tax it, then suddenly it's a vice? You see what I mean? Like the only difference between crime and vice is a tax being paid. Like, oh, alcohol's illegal. Oh,
hey,
well, it's regulated.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Taxation, if you don't, well, it's almost too late. But
right.
If you don't recognize the tax from the beginning, they can't say you owe the tax. It's once you decide that once they tax you and you say, okay, I agree and I pay the tax, you're stuck paying the tax. It's like the folk legend stories about the guy that never recognized the U.S. government IRS taxation and never paid. And after 40 years, they came after him. But the fact that he never signed up for it and never paid it, because it's a voluntary act.
Well, you should read Lysander Spooner's book called Lysander Spooner. He wrote this back in the 1800s. He was like the original anarchist, and he wrote a book called No Treason. And he basically said, hey, I never consented to the Constitution even. I never consented to that. I never signed anything. As a matter of fact, he went and
That's a good point.
He started his own mail delivery service, and was competing with the U.S. Postal Service. And what happened? He was doing a better job for a lower price, and well, they regulated him out of business.
I've thought about that, and it might be time for that again, because FedEx, they subcontract their subcontractors, like for FedEx.
Right.
And then they'll take a whole bunch of truck and ride out to the local post office and give it to them.
Right.
So you actually could start, well, I might be blowing somebody up right now, but you actually could start your own postal delivery service, in like, even if it was local, regional, whatever. You probably could get away with it right now because the big carriers are having trouble taking care of everything.
Well, I think it should all be private, but and what makes me happy is when I'm driving around and I see the postal, delivery trucks out there, and they're all jacked up. They've got like primer spots on them and stuff. You know, they need paint jobs. The graphics are all faded. They look like junkers.
Oh,
you know?
I got a TV last year that came soaking wet. It was so wet the corrugation on the box was separating. And the UPS driver said, "Well, all of our trucks leak." I was like, I think if I was driving this truck, if I had to bring a truck from home, I wouldn't bring me a TV that was so,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Well, we digress. Yeah. We're way sideways down a rabbit hole about now, but
well, I don't know. We're still kind of on the lines with cannabis, and so
anarchy.
Right? Yeah. Well, what bugs me is that you read these articles and they're like, oh, Colorado collected all of this revenue, in cannabis sales, and it all went into good things. Well, it doesn't all go into good things. Most of it goes into the bureaucracy, all that overhead to manage all that junk and all the crony stuff. And all you've done is made the government even bigger. And then, or they go, well, it goes into the schools. Well, I was doing some research into compulsory schooling in Oregon recently, and the whole concept of compulsory schooling came around here back in the 1920s. And it was pushed through by the KKK and the Masons, who didn't like the fact that the Catholics and the Jews had their own schools for their kids, And so we get into all this junk, and it's like, well, how about a better idea would be this? Like, if you want to collect the tax on the cannabis sales, well, then let the homeowners in the individual areas decide if that money should go back to them as a credit on their property taxes, or if they don't want, it could go to the schools, right? Why can't you make that choice? You can't tell me the technology's not there. They got all the software, the AIs and all that junk, it's totally doable for people to make choices like, well, I don't want the cannabis money to go to the public school. I'd rather it go to, a charter school or something like that, or I want it to go to my own home school.
Oh, but you're talking about creating another further bureaucracy behind all the other bureaucracies, because now you've got to have something to keep up with all their choices.
Well, that's
I kind of like the idea that you gave. I thought at first you were just saying, all right, give them a choice that as a community you say there could be cannabis here and taxed, but we want our property taxes to be dissolved before it goes to the schools.
Yeah, right.
But I'm more of a guy that thinks it just should all go to the kids and old people that can't take care of themselves, that took care of us when we were young.
Yeah, So it should be a choice, though. People could like make the choice, and you could manage. The technology's there to manage this sort of thing. You could do it like the Varion token I was talking about that Blue Frontiers is using is on a crypto network called Ethereum. And Ethereum has these smart contracts built into it that can manage these sorts of things. It's called a decentralized autonomous organization, and it could manage that. So people could just basically literally vote with their dollars and go, well, I want this to happen with this money. I want this to happen, and they could literally, and you don't have to have a big election and send out all this junk in the mailbox and stuff. It could all be electronically, and it's all on the blockchain. So I think the technology is there, and through this sort of thing, people can, within their communities, without having to even completely dissolve communities like we're talking about, where people are just like, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to go my own way and find other people like me. Well, maybe some of us have to still live amongst each other. Like my neighbors are completely different across the political spectrum than I am. I mean, all around me, we all have different views, but we get along really well. It's incredible. And it amazes me, actually. You have the politics, on one level, but then when you have your conversations on the curb, you realize that you love your neighbor. You don't want to you don't want anything bad to happen to him, and you'd help him out. You'd totally help him out in a pinch. And so what I'm saying is that you could have basically what Doug Casey would refer to as files, where people don't necessarily have to completely extricate themselves from their community. They still live within their community, but networking with other like-minded peoples and even unlike-minded peoples where they're compromising with one another. You know, what I don't like is like where I live. I think my property taxes now are $1,000 higher than they were when I bought my house 10 years ago, and almost all of the money goes to school bonds and all this kinds of stuff. And I don't have any kids. I'm not going to have any kids, and if I did have any kids, I wouldn't put them in any of those schools. And
okay. So I see what I see. I've got friends like that too, and I agree. I see your point, and well, you know what? I have no kids. All right, so I agree, but I always just think that part of the problem with our country is that we don't put enough into making sure the kids are comfortable and they're able to have a good education and comfort. And I know that's a burden on some of us that don't have kids, but and I'm not against you though. I totally agree with your concept. I just guess I'm getting old, and as you get old, you just want to, you don't care about giving shit away, I guess.
Well, it's not about that. It's just how it's done. Like
yeah, the bureaucracy. Yeah.
Well, and not just that. Like school was a horrible environment for me. I shouldn't have been in the school. It actually held me back. You know, I could have accomplished way more with my youth if I hadn't been in a public school. You know, it stifled me, and so
I never felt stifled, but I also lived around the world in different areas where I lived in very high educational districts, and I've always been educated in very low, and there is a difference. And some private schools are good, but I'm not sure. Oh, well, I'm sorry. I kind of lost because I'm not really sure where you were going with that, and I mentioned. Oh well,
I'm just saying is that I'm addressing public schools in particular. I think it's funny. Like I have a friend who she does what's called unschooling. She unschools her kids. Dana Martin, you could find her online. And I used to do podcasts. I'd have her on all the time. And her kids are. I've had some of her kids on my show too when I was doing podcasts, and her kids are super smart, very skilled, but they're specialized in certain things. Like her oldest son decided he wanted to be a blacksmith, so he figured out how to be a blacksmith, and he built his forge, and then he started a little business, and he got his own operation going on, and and that was something that rarely happens if you're in a public school system where you could go into a direction like that. I didn't get that opportunity until I was my 12th year in school, where I was finally came across a class where I was able to do something like that. And
like a shop class or something. Same for me, about 12, 13, 14. But I was in Texas, which was they had a big strong scholastic education network, and they had shop classes, and they had all kinds of intuitive and progressive thoughts. Like you didn't have class the same time every day.
Right.
You only had English 4 times of the week, and one day you didn't have English, or one day you didn't have math, or one day you didn't have science. They thought it opened up to refresh you, because one day you could have a break during the week, so it didn't made school a little happier. But I was thinking we're getting out there like we're writing a book. But is there other stuff about your aquaponics and whatever you'd bring it back into the show that you'd like to discuss? Things you're doing that we haven't talked about already. And Steve probably has a question.
I think one thing I'd like to do is I'd really like to encourage people to cultivate fish in their systems that they could eat. And I think that it was something when the catfish cartel started coming down on little boutique operators like me, it made me realize that I was onto something, and that this was a way that you could sustainably produce a lot of food for people. And so I would say, if you're in this game and you're into the aquaponics, and and you're spreading the word of aquaponics to people, you know, get them along that line of where they could potentially produce, you know, the greatest amount of food and medicine for themselves and their family. And I found that the catfish I found were great for that, you know, and so you know, they're easy to raise. They'll tolerate the most horrible water conditions. If you screwed up, you know, they'll tolerate it.
Oh yeah, they're rough and tough. That's a rough and tough species right there. And you can, and being farm bred like you would have them there and treated so well, you know, when you harvested them, they'd be real good, tasty eating too.
Yeah, you put them in the purge tank for a few days, and you know, and they taste wonderful. There's no off taste. There's no muddy taste. You know, there's none of that.
Oh.
There's none of that. I mean, most of those bad flavors you get are from blue-green algae. You know, from
farm bred catfish taste. I never liked catfish. They were a little too fishy for me.
Yeah.
Then I ate farm bred catfish in a restaurant one night that they own their own, you know, catfish farm. And that was some good catfish. That was a good fish. That was good eating. That was good old southern eating right there.
So when we do a real rapid kill with the trout when we turn them over.
Yeah.
When we turn them over real quickly, we have a local chef that taught us how to do that. And the trout, man, it's like sushi grade. It's so good.
Right.
And we cut it right up. Well, we don't sell it to the public, but we'll take one if it jumps out or whatever, or we'll kill them real quick or take one home for ourselves and kill them real quick and cut them up, have some sushi, and it's real good. You don't even have to cook them.
I've wondered if you could do sashimi grade catfish. One of my customers is a sushi chef, and we've talked a lot about this. You know, if you you know, I've done a little bit of experimentation with this, but I haven't gone all the way with, you know, how saline I could get that water before they die, and then you flash freeze, you know, to kill off any other parasites in there, and you know, and the flash freezing is really the key to having safe sashimi. And but I've thought that it could be cool, you know, to produce a freshwater sashimi grade product. That would be amazing to be able to do that, you know, especially if you get that into your local market.
Oh yeah, that'd be really good. It's definitely something that I think is definitely an opportunity for a lot of people. So thanks a lot for coming on. I want to it's almost 9 o'clock. I want to give everyone else a chance real quick to let us know what they're doing before we wrap the show up. But I really appreciate it. Sounds like you're doing a bunch of really cool stuff, and I'll get the rest of the links that you mentioned added to the description here at the end of the show when we repost it. Thanks a lot for coming on. Do you want to tell people again before we go how to find you? I think he's breaking up there. His connection died, or is it on my end, or?
How about now?
There you go. Now it's working.
Oh, okay. My website is pyramidpurefoods.com. And if you want to learn more about seasteading, you can go to blue-frontiers.com.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
That is cool. That really does sound cool, that Blue Frontiers deal. That I'd love to be able to do that one day and try it out for maybe a year, you know, or 6 months or whatever. I'm sure people will rotate in and out.
Yeah, I want to be out there on the high seas with my algae farm. That's my goal.
Yeah. I like the algae farm idea. There's a lot of, you know, fuel, right? Fuel.
Exactly. Yeah, fuel and food.
Fuel.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot. You're welcome to hang out the rest of the show. So
all right.
Give everybody else a chance real quick.
I'm going to mute up here.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, Steve, keep your microphone up, buddy.
Oh, yeah. I don't know why my mic's being so quiet today.
I don't know, because it's so you're laid back, so your microphone's taking a cue from you. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can fix that.
That was excellent. That was cool. That was really cool.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Thank you, Drew. That was a lot of great concepts. I tell you what, I love almost every concept. Well, I loved every concept you had, actually. You know, there was nothing negative about it. It was great. And yeah, we all think about that. Some of us all think about that.
So what have you been up to, Marty? See if he's here at the moment. He might have kid
Let's
egg.
get Marty going.
Might be putting his kids to sleep or something. Okay, we'll come back to Marty. What have you been up to, Mr. Green Jeans?
I got it. I got that one right this time, huh? Yeah, not much. Same old stuff. Thanks. Boy, it was a great show tonight, wasn't it? Fantastic couple of guests. You know, I've been getting a lot of emails, I guess, from the podcast. It's really great. Still trying to answer them all. You know, I'm answering questions. You know, people are asking me about growing stuff and everything. And my wife is answering some of the ones about people are requesting genetics and seeds and things like that. So thanks a lot for everybody, for all the attention. greenjeansgarden.com. It's been awesome. This was a great show tonight, wasn't it? Fantastic, man. Yeah. Drew was amazing. And Breeder Steve. I mean, oh my God, there were two separate. They could have been just separate, right? I mean, like, fantastic. Yeah.
So I had a question for you, and I figured it'd be better just to ask on the show. So how would you recommend the best way to permanently preserve your pollen?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think I've taken ones out of after 6 months in frozen, you know, successfully frozen it. And I think if it's just dry, but that's as long as I've ever really tested it. So I imagine it'll probably last longer than that. It's frozen, right? But it just has to be really dry. I mean, that's the thing, is to get it extremely dry first. And so I've done it in just very small quantities, because obviously the more you do, right, the more likely it is to be wet. So a very small amount, you know, with just a couple of grains of rice dried out or whatever. Or you could use, maybe you could use a desiccant, like you know, silica gel or something like that. And just make sure it's super dry and then airtight and frozen. And I've used it after 6 months and it's worked perfectly. But you know, I usually use pollen right away. I don't usually store it much longer than a couple of weeks or whatever. So I'm probably not really the guy to ask. That the limit that I've ever used it is around 6 months. And I don't think that's that long. I think people have successfully stored it longer than that. I think that the key is just getting it real dry and cold. Maybe frozen, or more frozen than the freezer. Maybe something, you know, like your cryogenic, like your deep freezer. I don't know. I really don't know. It's a great question. I'd love to know the answer, Steve.
Well, how about this question? Since how do you, why don't you give everybody a tip on how you collect your pollen?
Oh yeah.
What was that?
Yeah. Man, I have the well, let
me give you a live demonstration.
I should have. You caught me off guard. You know, really, the thing about it is that pollen really, it drops pretty much straight down, especially when, well, after a while, when the everything starts to get really dry and everything, it blows and everything. But the first few, when the flower right away is first open, and the pollen's pretty heavy and it's kind of wet and everything. And as long as there's not a really strong wind blowing, it takes a good shock. I can even, a plant that's got a bunch of open flowers on it, it's possible to even pick it up really carefully and move it around without even jiggling the flowers enough to knock the pollen off it. I know that sounds incredible, but it's definitely possible, because it takes a pretty good, you know. So, but I'm just talking about just a barely open, you know, because that's all it really takes. And what I use is a bottle cap. I glue it. I hot glue it to the end of a chopstick, and I use a beer bottle cap, upended, glued on the end of a chopstick. and or you could use, you don't have to use a beer bottle cap. You could use a medicine bottle cap or something, but it's very convenient because you can hold it in there and use the end of another chopstick, and you could just tease. You could pin one of the flowers to the edge of the bottle cap, for example, and you have both of them on the end of a stick. Damn, it caught me off guard. I'll next
So
week.
it's kind of like pinch. You kind of pinch it.
I'll give it proper demonstration. But yeah, you can. So this way, I'm talking about you can get it without just knock that. All the pollen will get knocked right into the bottle cap. I'm saying if you still have any kind of pollen fear. Earlier, I was saying don't have too much pollen fear unless you got a lot of wind going. As long as you don't have direct fans, if your male plants are not, that's a great reason not to have direct fans on your. Well, even for possible hermaphrodite flowers, that's a thing that direct fans all over the tops of the flowers can definitely have a lot more chance of spreading pollen, right? But anyway, yeah. That's what I do is I collect it with the bottle cap on the end of the chopstick and the end of another chopstick. And I promise next week I'll get a male plant and I'll I'll demonstrate it. But
That's
it's
cool.
easy. It's not bad. It's simple. I mean, anybody can do it. And basically I just use it fresh. You can also just store it on the counter for a week and it'll be fine when it's dry. You know what I mean? It's fine sort of.
As long as there's no direct fan.
yeah. Well, you don't have to, right. But I'm just saying that once it's dry, it'll store at room temperature for at least a week, but not that much longer. It starts to go bad. But what will kill it really fast is moisture. So if you're worried, if you think a plant has dropped pollen and you don't know, and you're paranoid about tracking it around and kicking it back up, and oh shit, I don't want to turn the fans back on because I might have dropped a bunch of pollen over here, because that's definitely possible, right? The thing to do then is to wet everything down, is to mist everything with water, because the water will can it. That's then no pollen fear. Then forget it. Then you're covered.
That's a great tip. That right there, people all over the world, when they hear this, are going to go,
yeah.
Oh, cool! I can actually try to breed. Maybe I'm not going to be scared.
Yeah. That's one of the things is don't have a lot of pollen fear. Take the males and stick them in the window. The other thing is you can chop them way back, right? They don't need as much room. Obviously, they can be cut back. They can be stuck to the side. But yeah, just don't put them under direct fans and watch them carefully. You'll see when they
cut them back, so you've got live foliage at the bottom of the plant, so to speak, like you would cut back to re-veg a plant, and then just let it redo it until you're ready to use it again and let it grow pollen sacs.
Not so much for that, but maybe just right away in the beginning. So if you say you have a crop of seedlings, a bunch of different ones, and as the males are showing, just as a way of making so that they don't, so the females can get more light and stuff like that, just start chopping back the males. But then it may not be a great idea if you want to observe their structures and all that. I'm just saying that, they could be put to the side. They don't need direct light. The females can be moved to the middle, and stuff like that. The males don't need. But also they could be cut back, as you say, to stall there, which is usually a good idea, because most males are very often, or at least 25 or 30% of the males are taller already and larger than the rest of the crop. It's one of the things they do, so they can.
Because you don't want them to. Are you going to only use them when it's a male? Now here's something I'm going to say. I have no clue to answer this question. They say never ask a question you don't know the answer to, but I'm going to ask you one now. How can you keep males, or once they do the pollen sacs? You mean as a clone? You go through that. What happens in the process of the male in the future? Or
you can clone them. You can clone a male. You can keep males as clones, just like you can with females. Yeah, sure. And in fact, In fact, it's a really good idea if you because progeny testing is basically the best way forward to figure out what males are the best. You know what I mean? You can look at them and you can choose them for a number of visual traits, but to really know, especially, well, not all, it depends on how the plants were bred. Not all seed batches, that do the males absolutely need to be progeny tested. I shouldn't say that across the board, but a lot of times with males, especially if they're the product of a couple of hybridizations, recent, multiple hybrids, then the males probably should be progeny tested. You know what I mean? They probably should be checked and see which ones are going to breed the best. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's a good way. It's a good way forward. You don't want to make mistakes with males, especially if you're going to save them like that as clones and continue to breed them.
Well, I guess I was also looking at what's the longevity of a male that you're going to use to get pollen from and breed with. That's kind of what I was asking, and I didn't phrase it.
If you don't take the clone from it, it's just gonna flower and
that's what I was asking. It's one time thing. You get the pollen, and it's going to be done.
Yeah.
Unless you clone it. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So you would clone it a little early too. Would you want to clone it before it flowered and had to?
Pretty early. When plants are seedlings and they're starting to flower, they can usually be rooted really easily, even when they're starting to show sex pretty well. They'll regenerate faster. Because they're making roots really quickly at the same time. The whole rooting process kicks most plants, and then there's some variation in genetics there, depending on the genes. If you're super, a lot of indica genetics will maybe slow the regeneration process. They can be reluctant to regenerate.
I think all this would make a lot of people out there wanting to try this a little more comfortable. That's why I wanted to go.
I think we
questions because
Man, I think it's the best way forward. I mean, Steve was saying that I think there's a future in breeding, and oh my gosh, of course there is. It's the way forward for everything, and especially if we all really start doing, everyone starts participating, and it becomes if all the farmers, the local, start breeding to match their terroir and stuff, as Frenchie was saying, that's going to be fantastic. And I think we're already starting.
After 15 years, you now, a buddy of yours from Overgrow, you and him might be involved in a major seed development project. Isn't that cool?
Fantastic. Amazing. Totally awesome, man. It's, I mean, that's why I was saying we've just really scratched the surface, just imagining what can be done with cannabis. It's just and a lot has changed in 25 years. I mean, there's been a tremendous amount of progress already, and only by a couple of a relative handful of underground breeders and stuff like that, basically. And now I think with greater interest of everybody. And I really think that it's become a lot, as I say, I wouldn't say easier, but I'd say a lot more likely to get somewhere in a few short generations without a great deal of frustration. You don't have to go through 5-6 generations to stabilize something with any decent kind of THC level, like you might have had to do in the 70s when you had first crossed an indica with a sativa. And then, THC levels in the few generations thereafter were all over the place. Kind of like I was making the analogy the other night about the Macintosh apple. It's kind of like that. It's like maybe seeds off the Macintosh might not be so good, but 5 or 6 generations down after then you can get a nice apple pretty easily. And that's where we're at now with cannabis genetics, is that it's definitely, not only is it easier now to get somewhere, but everybody really ought to. I feel like everybody really ought to start playing along. It's time. It's almost as if the plant itself is just asking us to do it too. it really goes along with organic gardening, growing practices, and everything. That whole thing of adaptability to your environment, to your growing skills, your particular special needs, and everything. It's just pretty exciting. I think we're gonna see a lot of cool stuff. Anyway, sorry for ranting on, Steve, but it's been great to be on the show. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you for all that doing with me. And Steve, I'm going to pass it to you. I see you've been unmuting, so you want to talk. So here you go, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah. What have you been up to there, Roger? So.
Oh, so you give it right back to me after I've been talking the whole time. Well, fighting with my old lady. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, no, not really. I just trying to get through things, running the forum and trying to get things set up. I'm going to go for the fall harvest kind of thing this year, because the way I've been waiting on lumber for a long time I got new infrastructure. Supposedly I was going to have the lumber on in September, but my best buddy, Will up in Tennessee, who we have a business doing rustic furniture, and we get log slabs, big log slabs and stuff like that. And he was going to bring me a bunch of lumber down to build my infrastructure, get my tool shed, and then allow me to do all the ends of my greenhouse and all. And he got crushed between a truck and a rollback, or a van and a rollback. So I'm waiting on him. He's back, in force right now, and he's getting ready to bring me my lumber, which is going to allow me to build all my infrastructure, because I got a ton of pine. He's milled me a whole trailer full of pine lumber to build my sheds and everything I need to build my new aquaponic setup. So I'm just waiting. I'm waiting. It's raining this week. We had beautiful summer weather last week at 86 to 90 degrees, and now this week it's gonna rain with thunderstorms and all every day. So other than that, not doing a whole lot. Just I was able to just cultivate a couple of small strawberry kush and blue dream plants. So I got a little bit of medicine now, and that's pretty cool. I got a couple experiments coming up, but nothing to really talk about other than that. I just had a good time being on the show with some great guests tonight, and I really wish that Breeder Steve would have, well, he's in Colombia. There's nothing to say about it other than the man was in Colombia on the phone. So, to even be able to talk to him, I think is a miracle of modern science. I just wish we could have been able to have better communications with him, because I think he had a lot of killer information, from what I could hear. I don't know about you guys. I struggled through that. And then Drew was awesome. He's got a million different concepts. So, I like that, because that's how my brain runs at 25/7. So it's been pretty cool. I see he's still over there. I don't know if he's listening. He's kind of quiet. Yeah. Everybody can unmute and chime in now, man. It's we're into the cocktail hour now.
All right. Thanks for the kudos. I really appreciate it.
No, man, I loved it. It was inspiring to hear somebody that thinks. Yeah, I'm not trying to kiss your butt or nothing, but you think a lot about, like I think about a lot of things, and it
was some great stuff.
Drew. It was interesting what you said.
Yeah,
this is the coolest show I've ever been on, so I really learned so much.
Thank you, Steve and Marty.
Yeah, Mr. Green Jeans, that was some cool shit right there, and Breeder Steve, that was amazing. I got my mic all jacked up here. Sorry. That was amazing stuff there. Sorry. I flipped up my microphone. Yeah, this is a great show. I learned a lot tonight.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Anytime, even if you just want me to sit here.
I wanted to also quick plug. We Josh and I from Dutch Blooms are throwing the Science of Regenerative aquaponic cultivation course, which will be held on July 16th through 20th, and then in Ouroboros Farms. You can find the information on that at regenerativeorganiccannabis.com. And you can also we'll have information up on there, and hopefully tomorrow, or worst case this weekend, on ouroborosfarms.com. It's a little bit expensive. It's I think $2,500 for the 5 days, but it is with Elaine Ingram, Dr. Susan Wainwright, Chris Trump, Dr. Faust, myself, Ken Armstrong, and we're still working on a couple of other speakers as well for the evening session. So you definitely
That's
won't want to miss it.
incredible. So you got Dr. Lane to commit for sure.
Yep.
So that was great.
Yep.
That's
So we got her. She's going to be doing a 3-day course on microbes in both soil and aquatic food webs. So it's going to be really quite the experience, and definitely something you're not going to miss. And then we're going to cap it all off with a nice big party on Saturday. So you're definitely going to want to come down. Even if you can't afford to come to the other class, definitely come out on Saturday and come party with us. So thanks a lot.
I'm going to be calling Southwest Airlines tomorrow to see if I can make the party. You know.
All righty.
I'll fly on the hope you don't crash in a mountain flight all the way out there.
If you guys want to keep talking a minute, you're welcome to. I'm going to make myself some food real quick because I'm about to keel over. But yeah, if you guys still want to talk for a little bit longer, I can leave the stream up for a little bit.
Why not? We can talk. If you want, some people, have we got anybody in chat? Is anybody monitoring that, Steve, before you leave?
Dogo says hi. BrayneGro. Jessica O.
Tell BrayneGro to log in so we can talk to him.
Hogmaster.
Tell Hogmaster to log in so we can talk to him.
So, well, I think they all have come and gone over the course of the evening. So, alrighty. Yeah, I'll leave you guys to it unless you guys are all running as well.
I'm out.
Well, go ahead.
All right.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I gotta go. Good night, because I'm.
Okay.
I have my friend here, and he's playing it. Can you hear him playing the outro over here? He's like, I'm with the electric guitar. Thanks, but
why don't you play us out?
Yeah, I know he is. Tell him, hey, here he is. I'm here with my friend Doc Fred. Yeah,
doing the outro right here.
The outro. Hey, what was it?
Little Pink Floyd.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching.